The rain in Rookhart doesn't just fall, it clings. It was doing its usual number on the cobblestones of Sycamore Alley, a slick, cold misery that seeped right through the worn soles of my service shoes. I hated this city. I hated this rain. But most of all, I hated the panic that climbed my throat every time I pushed through the unmarked, heavy oak door of the Velvet Lantern. Inside, the world shifted. The miserable Pennsylvania chill vanished, replaced by air thick with purple light, expensive perfume, and the frantic, tumbling notes of a live jazz quartet. The Lantern was a secret, a place where the real money in this Rust Belt husk of a city came to play. And I was the help. "Win, you're late. 2 minutes. "Mister," Dubois hissed, his pencil-thin mustache twitching. He didn't look up from his ledger. "Sorry, Mr. Dubois, the bus was slow." Excuses are for the unemployed. Table 7 needs their prize. And try not to look like a drowned rat. This isn't a soup kitchen. I nodded, my throat tight, and hurried to the wine cellar. My apron was stiff. My bun was tight, but my hands wouldn't stop their faint tremor. It was the debt. Always the debt. Mom's hospital bills were stacked on my dresser like a monument to failure, and my paycheck from this place was the only thing keeping the wolves from the door. Tonight's prize was a Barolo, a 1998, a bottle that cost more than my next 3 months' rent. I cradled it like a newborn. My certification lessons from the sommelier course, the one I was taking on 2 hours of sleep a night, running through my head. Support the base. Angle at 45 degrees. Present the label clearly. I moved through the main room. The purple light caught the cigar smoke, making it swirl like captured ghosts. The jazz was loud, a frantic drum solo rattling my teeth. Table 7 was in the back, the best booth, shielded from the main floor by a heavy velvet curtain. I saw them first, a table of suits. 2 of them looked bored, their faces puffy and pink. They had that distinct air of low-level authority, the kind of men who enjoy saying no. They had portfolios open on the table. Port Commerce Authority, Special Investigations, the PCASI, the guys who checked imports on the docks and inspected restaurants for whatever they could find. Another man, older, with silver hair and a politician's smile, Councilman Rhett Mallory, was leaning in, laughing too loud. And then there was him. He wasn't laughing, and he was sitting perfectly still, his back to the wall. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-30s, in a black suit so perfectly tailored it looked less like clothing and more like armor. His hair was dark. His face was all sharp angles and unforgiving planes, but it was his eyes that held the room. They were dark, steady, and looked like they were dissecting everything they saw. This was Adrian Corvino. Even I, in my little world of debt and buses, knew that name. The Corvino family didn't just own property in Rookhart. They owned Rookhart. I took a breath, stepped forward, and began my script. "Good evening, gentlemen, the 1998 Barolo. An excellent choice." My voice sounded thin over the music. I presented the bottle to the table at large. As Corvino was the host, he just nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. I turned to place the bottle on the service tray. My heel caught on the edge of the Persian rug, and the world dissolved into a nightmare of slow-motion physics. My ankle twisted. The bottle, that priceless, rent-paying, life-saving bottle, flew from my grip. It didn't shatter. Oh, God, if only it had. Instead, it spun, and a perfect, beautiful, ruby-red arc of vintage Barolo leaped from the neck and painted the entire front of Adrian Corvino's black jacket. The jazz quartet hit a sour note and stopped. The entire club, all 50 tables, went silent. I stared at the dark, spreading stain. It looked like blood. You clumsy mister." Dubois was at my side, his face a mask of purple fury. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "You worthless girl, do you know who this is? You have humiliated this establishment. You have insulted Mr. Corvino." I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I could feel the tears, hot and shameful, welling up. This was it. Fired, blacklisted. How would I pay for Mom's medication next week? The two PCASI agents smirked. "That's a real shame," one said, enjoying the show. "Looks like a lack of staff training. Dubois, we'll have to make a note." "Get out," Dubois shoved me. "You're fired, go." "I please—" A hand, not Dubois's, gently brushed the lapel of the stained jacket. "It's just wine," a voice said. It was low, quiet, and cut through the panic like a diamond cuts glass. Adrian Corvino hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched. He was looking at Dubois, not me. Then, with an agonizingly slow scrape of wood on stone, he pulled an empty chair out from the table. He looked at me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. "Sit down." The room held its breath. "What?" I stammered. "Sir, I can't, I have to clean." "Dubois," Corvino said, his voice still soft. "Let go of her arm." The manager dropped my arm like it was on fire. "I said," Corvino repeated, his gaze locked on me. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, like gravity. I sank into the chair, my legs giving out. He calmly took the white linen napkin from his lap. He didn't hand it to me. He didn't call for help. He began to dab at the stain on his own jacket, his movements economical and precise. As he did, he shifted his body just slightly, his broad shoulder now blocking me from the direct view of the little black security camera mounted above the bar. I saw the move. It was deliberate. Why would he do that? "Well, now, Adrian," Councilman Mallory chimed in, his smile slimy and accommodating. He put a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, unwanted weight. "Don't be too hard on the girl. A pretty thing like this. I'm sure she's very, very sorry. Maybe she can find a way to work off the damages in other ways." His thumb brushed the side of my neck. A cold, sharp wave of disgust rolled through me. Before I could flinch, Adrian Corvino's hand closed around Mallory's wrist, not fast, just definitively. "Rhett," Corvino said, a polite, razor-thin smile touching his lips. "I didn't realize your position on the council now included procurement. Your hand is on my guest." Mallory's smile froze. He tried to pull his wrist away, but Corvino's grip was immovable. "Stick to zoning, Rhett," Adrian continued, his voice a pleasant murmur. "It's safer for you." He released the wrist. Mallory snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned, his face pale. In that frozen, terrible moment, my eyes darted to the tray I had dropped. The bottle lay on its side, the rest of the wine puddling on the silver. The label, soaked dark red, was peeling at the corner, and underneath it, I saw something. A small, metallic-looking square. It wasn't part of the label. It was too modern, too clean. It looked like an NFC tag, the kind you tap with your phone. I'd seen them on New World bottles for anti-counterfeiting, but on a 1998 Barolo Never, it was wrong. The PCASI agent, the one with the smarmy face, cleared his throat, trying to get the power back. "Well, Mr. Corvino, this entire incident shows a clear lapse in service standards, a real mess. And frankly, on our initial inspection, we found contamination in the kitchen ice bin." Dubois sputtered. "There is no—" "We'll be writing a citation." The agent clicked his pen, his eyes on me. He was making me the scapegoat for his shakedown. "A $5,000 fine, unless accommodations can be made." This was the game. The fine was for Dubois. The humiliation was for me. Adrian Corvino sighed. It was a sound of profound, infinite boredom. He reached into the breast pocket of his ruined jacket and pulled out a slim, black checkbook and a silver pen. "What's the damage, Dubois?" he asked, not looking up. "For the wine, for the contamination." "Sir, the wine is—" "Just a number, please. I'm a busy man." Dubois, shaking, stammered. 10,000 for the inconvenience and the bottle." Adrian scribbled, the pen scratching in the silence. He tore the check out and slid it across the table. Dubois picked it up. His eyes widened. Then they widened further, his face going from red to a sickly paper white. He'd read the memo line. Adrian's voice was soft, for Dubois alone, an advance, for the silence of the faint of heart. Are we clear?" Dubois snapped his mouth shut and nodded, pocketing the check. The PCA-SI agents looked baffled, their leverage gone. Adrian Corvino turned his full attention back to me. The chair was still pulled out. As I said, Ms. Wynne, Sir Cassia Wynne. And Miss Wynne, sit. This time, I didn't hesitate. I was already sitting. He ignored the spill, the agents, Mallory, and the staring room. He looked at my hands, which were shaking so badly I had to hide them in my lap. "You love wine," he said. It wasn't a question. I'm studying for my Level 2 sommelier certification." My voice was a reedy whisper. "Your hands are shaking." "I'm scared I'm going to be fired, sir." He held my gaze. His eyes were like looking into a deep, dark well. "You're not scared," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "For me alone. You're terrified. There's a difference. Scared is spilling the wine. Terrified is what comes after. The debt." My breath hitched. How could he know? He motioned to a passing waiter. "Bring Miss Win a glass of water, and bring me a club soda." He kept me there for 10 minutes. He didn't mention the spill again. He asked me what I thought of the '98 vintage. He asked me about tannin structure and the smell of wet earth. He spoke, and I answered, the terror slowly receding, replaced by a strange, humming curiosity. He was protecting me. The most dangerous man in Rookhart was protecting me from a sleazy politician and 2 corrupt inspectors. Finally, he nodded. "You may go, Miss Wynne." Dubois, now pale and obsequious, practically escorted me to the staff door. "Take the rest of the night off. Cassia, my apologies for the misunderstanding." I was out of my uniform and back in my thin coat in under a minute. The rain was still lashing the alley. I pulled my coat tight and ran for the bus stop. My mind a blur. I still had a job. I was safe. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, under a sputtering yellow light. A black sedan, too clean for this part of town, cruised past me. It slowed. It stopped at the corner, waiting, its engine a low thrum. No plates, just a rental sticker on the windshield. A cold dread, colder than the rain, washed over me. That wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't Rookhart paranoia. I ducked into the 24-hour bodega, my heart pounding, and pretended to look at a bag of stale chips. Through the dirty glass, I watched. The car waited. A mile away, Adrian Corvino sat in the back of his Maybach, dabbing the last of the club soda on his jacket. His driver, a man built like a refrigerator named Rafa, murmured from the front seat. "Boss, the girl, Wynne, she picked up a tail. Unmarked sedan. Looks like Varangian overspill. Sloppy." Adrian looked in his own side mirror. He saw the black car idling under the yellow light. He recognized the type. "Separate them, Rafa," he said, his voice flat. "Gently. She's had a rough night." The Maybach made an effortless, silent U-turn, slid into a dark alley, and emerged behind the sedan. Rafa flashed the high beams a specific coded pattern. The sedan's driver jerked, suddenly realizing he was no longer the hunter. The car fishtailed, then sped off, running a red light and disappearing into the rainy night. I peeked out from the bodega. The car was gone, just gone. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself I'd imagined it. I ran for the bus. The image of the wrong label, the strange NFC tag, burning in my mind. I was completely, terrifyingly unaware that I hadn't just spilled wine. I had just touched, ever so lightly, the edges of a war. The bus ride back to Ravenblock was the longest 40 minutes of my life. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror was the black sedan. Every man in a dark coat was an agent, a watcher. By the time I got to my peeling apartment door on the 4th floor, I was convinced I was imagining it all the tale. The threat, the strange, quiet intensity in Adrian Corvino's eyes. My apartment smelled like old plaster and the faint, lingering scent of my neighbor's boiled cabbage. It was a world away from the purple smoke and jazz of the velvet lantern. I leaned against the door, my heart still a frantic drum, and slid the deadbolt home. The click sounded weak, pathetic. My hands were still shaking, but now with adrenaline, not fear, I fumbled for my phone, in the blur of the spill, as Mallory was posturing and Dubois was turning purple. I'd managed one quick, clumsy snapshot of the ruined bottle on the service tray. I'd done it without thinking. A reflex from my sommelier class document anything unusual. I pulled up the photo. It was blurry, half obscured by the silver tray, but the thing I'd glimpsed was clear. The peeling edge of the label, and beneath it, that perfect metallic square. I opened an app on my phone, one I used for scanning QR codes on cheap supermarket wine. I held it over the image of the tag, the phone word, trying to read the pixels. I didn't expect it to work. Then it did. My screen didn't open a website for a vineyard. It just filled with a string of text, ZCTR/998/LOT4 ANRTS/100 KUSD XFR. It was nonsense, a jumble of letters and numbers. But below the text, the app had rendered a logo embedded in the data. It was a stark, black graphic, a stylized circle made of two snakes, or maybe dragons, biting each other's tails, in the center, a hard-edged, interlocking V and C. Varangian Circle. The name meant nothing to me, but it felt cold. It felt wrong. It was the kind of name that belonged in the shadows, not on a bottle of 1998 Barolo. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump so hard I almost dropped it. A text, unknown number. My blood froze. I never got texts from unknown numbers. The bottle? The one you spilled. Bring it to Pier 12. Midnight. Don't be stupid, babe. I couldn't breathe. How did they get my number? My number wasn't public. I'd only given it to the hospital and Mr. Dubois. The black sedan. It was real. They hadn't just tailed me. They knew who I was. I sank onto my threadbare sofa, my mind racing. Bring them the bottle? I didn't have the bottle. I remembered the last I saw of it, one of the smirking PCACI agents, the ones who had tried to shake down Dubois, had carefully placed it in a plastic evidence bag. Seized, he'd said, pending investigation. They had it, the corrupt inspectors. So why were these Varangian Circle people texting me? A horrible realization settled in. They didn't know the PCASE had it. They thought I did. Or maybe they were all in on it together. I was trapped. I couldn't deliver what I didn't have. My only options were to ignore it and pray they'd go away. Or what? Walk into the lion's den. I was just a waitress. I had Mom's bills to pay. This wasn't my fight. I didn't go to Pier 12. I spent the night on my sofa, jumping at every creak of the old building, my phone clutched in my hand. The next evening, I left for my shift. I was exhausted, strung out on caffeine and terror. I decided to take the shortcut through the alley behind my building, just to get to the lighted main street faster. It was a mistake. They were waiting. Two men, different from the PCASI agents at the club, but cut from the same cheap cloth. They wore windbreakers that didn't fit, and their faces had the same dull, entitled look. Cassia Wynne. One stepped out from a recessed doorway, blocking my path. I tried to turn, but the other one was behind me. A perfect, simple trap. "We need to talk about that bottle," the first one said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We sent you a message. You didn't answer. That's not polite." I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my bag clutched to my chest. "I'm just going to work." "We think you have something that doesn't belong to you," the second one said, his voice gravelly. He was closer now. "We're just going to check." He reached for my bag. "No," I yanked it back. "Get away from me." "She wants to do this the hard way." The first one grabbed my arm. "That's not how an official search works." The voice was the same one from the club, low, calm, and absolutely lethal. It sliced through the damp alley air. The men froze. I looked past the man holding my arm. Adrian Corvino was standing at the mouth of the alley, and he was alone. He wasn't in his perfect suit, but in dark trousers and a black cashmere coat that seemed to drink the meager light. He looked completely out of place, like a panther that had wandered into a rat's nest. "Who the hell are you?" the man holding me snarled. but his grip loosened. "He's asking about your credentials," Adrian said. He took one slow step into the alley. "Last night, your friends said they were with the PCASI. I assume you are, too." "Yeah, that's right, PCASI," the gravelly-voiced one said, trying to regain his footing. "This is official business, butt out." "Then I assume," Adrian said, his voice still terrifyingly pleasant, "you have a warrant to search this woman's private property. I'd like to see it." A beat of silence. The man holding me glanced at his partner. "They didn't have a warrant. They weren't cops." "We don't need a warrant from you, pal." The gravelly one, the one behind me, was impatient. He pulled something from his jacket, a short, heavy-looking baton. "Now get lost before you get hurt." He lunged, not at Adrian, but at me. He never made it. The man who had driven Adrian's car, Raffaletto, seemed to materialize from the shadows beside his boss. I hadn't even seen him. Rafa wasn't fast like a boxer. He was fast like a falling anvil. He didn't punch. He moved. He met the man's lunge, his big hand catching the wrist that held the baton. There was a precise, economical twist. It didn't make a loud crack. It was a thick, muffled pop. The baton clattered on the wet pavement. The man made a sound, a high-pitched gasp, and dropped to his knees, his face sheet white, cradling his arm. The first agent, the one still holding my coat, let me go as if my skin had turned to fire. He stared at his partner on the ground, then at Rafa, then at Adrian. "I believe," Adrian said, not raising his voice. "Your business here is concluded. Leave." The first man didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his injured partner, hauling him to his feet, and they scrambled away, disappearing into the darkness. The alley was silent again, save for the sound of my own breathing, which was coming in ragged, painful sobs. Adrian Corvino looked at me. His face was unreadable in the gloom. "You're still shaking. Miss Wynne." They texted me," I whispered, the words tumbling out. "They said to go to Pier 12. They wanted the bottle. I didn't know what to do." "I know." He gestured toward the street, where the dark Maybach idled, its engine a silent promise of warmth. "Get in the car. You look like you need a real meal, not whatever you were running for." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a small, immaculate restaurant I'd never seen before. It wasn't fancy like the Lantern. It was real. It smelled of roasting garlic, fresh basil, and tomatoes that had been simmering for 8 hours. There was no jazz, just the quiet clink of forks. Adrian ordered for both of us in fluent Italian a simple pasta. He sat back, watching me. He slid a folded linen napkin across the table. "I paid a visit to the Velvet Lantern this morning. Spoke to the chef. The 1998 Barolo wasn't on their usual manifest. It came from a new importer." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Northbridge Cellars, LLC. The address is a post office box in Delaware. They don't exist." He was investigating, too. He was in this as much as I was. "Tell me what you saw last night, Mo," he said, "besides the wine on my jacket." I took a shaky breath. The label, it was wrong. "How?" "The tag, the NFC tag you saw me looking at, it was hidden under the paper. It was too modern, but it was the paper itself, too—" He leaned in, his dark eyes focused entirely on me. "Go on." "The smell." I gestured to the waiter printing a receipt at the bar. "You smell that? That's thermal paper. It has a faint, sharp, chemical smell, like a new circuit board. The label on that bottle, it smelled like that, not like old porous Italian paper stock, which should smell like, well, like dust and history." I finally felt my footing. I knew. "Wine talks," I said, my voice steadier. "It's not just taste, it's the story, the terroir, the smell of the air, the type of wood, that wine even with the spill. I could smell the vintage. It wanted to tell me it was from a dry harvest, that it had aged in Allier oak, which gives it that hint of spice. But the bottle was telling me it was printed at an office supply store. A slow, genuine smile touched the corners of Adrian Corvino's mouth. It transformed his entire face, softening the harsh angles. "Dubois just saw a spill," he said, his voice quiet. "The PCASI just saw leverage. You listened." He leaned back, the smile fading into something more serious. "I need someone who knows how to listen, Cassia." My heart stuttered. "Need me for what I'm a waitress." "You're a sommelier, and you're in trouble. Those men in the alley weren't PCAC. They were muscle for Varangian Circle. They think you have that bottle, or worse, that you know why it's special. They know where you live." The pasta arrived, steaming and perfect, but I couldn't eat. "I'm offering temporary protection," he said, as if discussing the weather. "A car to take you to and from work, and to your mother's clinic. New locks on your apartment door. A man stationed in your building's lobby." I recoiled. The words hit me like a slap. A guard in my lobby. Like a prisoner. The panic of the debt was one thing. This was another. This was a cage. I don't want to be owned, Mr. Corvino." "This isn't about ownership. It's about staying alive." "I appreciate the help in the alley," I said, my voice rising. "I do. But I can take care of myself. I've been doing it my whole life." His face hardened, losing all its warmth. "Can you—"
Bzzz.
My phone, sitting on the table between us. Another text. Unknown number. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I turned the screen over. It wasn't words. It was a picture. My mom, she was walking out of the clinic, her cheap cloth coat pulled tight against the wind, her face pale and tired. The photo was grainy, taken from across the street. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. This was my fault. I brought this to her door. A second text came through. "Don't be stubborn." The shaking was back, violent and uncontrollable. I couldn't even hide it. Adrian saw my face, didn't look at my phone. He didn't have to. He placed his hand on the table, palm up, near mine, but not touching. It was a solid, steady, physical presence, a fortress wall in the middle of my collapsing world. "They know where she is. Cassia," he said, his voice quiet, factual. "They won't be as gentle as my man Rafa. They won't just dislocate a wrist." I stared at his hand, the debt, the job, the smell of garlic, the Varangian Circle. It all evaporated. This was the only thing that mattered. I tore my eyes away from the picture of my mom and met his dark, steady gaze. "I'll accept your protection," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I won't be one of your things. I'm not selling my soul." He nodded, just once, as if this was the only answer he'd accept. "I'm not in the market for souls, Miss Wynne." He turned his hand over, resting it flat on the white tablecloth. "Do you think you owe me something for this? For the check I wrote Dubois for the ride home?" I couldn't speak. I just stared, shaking. "You owe me nothing," Adrian Corvino said, his voice a low, iron promise. "You only owe it to yourself to survive." Rafa drove us from the Italian restaurant, not back to Ravenblock, but downtown. The Maybach was as silent as a tomb, gliding through the wet, screaming city. My mom was safe for now. Rafa had made a call, and I'd spoken to her. A gas leak in her building. She was being moved to a complimentary room at the Rookhart Grand Hotel, with a private nurse, one of Adrian's people. The relief was so profound it made me sick. We didn't use the front entrance of Sable Tower. We pulled into a private underground garage that sealed shut behind us, cutting off the sound of the city. The air smelled of clean concrete and expensive exhaust. Sable Tower wasn't like the Velvet Lantern, all purple velvet and hidden sins. This was the opposite. The lobby was a 3-story atrium of polished black marble, structural steel, and floor-to-ceiling glass. The rain, which had been my enemy my whole life, was now just a silent, beautiful show on the other side of the soundproof walls. This place wasn't cozy. It was a fortress. We went to the top floor, his office. It was vast, minimalist, and dark, save for the lights of Rookhart glittering below us like a spilled jewelry box. 2 people were waiting, A man and a woman in suits that cost more than my mom's entire medical debt. They didn't smile. Mirabelle and Holt, Adrian said, gesturing to them. My legal team. The woman, Miss Mirabelle, slid a thin portfolio across the massive mahogany desk. Miss Wynne, a pleasure when it wasn't. This is an agreement of secure stewardship. It is not an employment contract. It stipulates that you are placing yourself under the protection of Mr. Corvino's organization. It guarantees your safety, housing, and the complete security of your immediate family, namely, your mother, Sarah Wynne, in exchange for your discretion and cooperation. Legalese for we own your safety now. It also includes a non-disclosure agreement with a penalty clause so high I'd need 10 lifetimes to pay it, I observed, my voice flat. Miss Mirabelle raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. You read quickly. I read a lot of fine print on loan agreements. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, cold. I thought of my mom's face in that grainy photograph. I signed my name. My signature looked shaky, a little boat on a black ocean of text. When they left, Adrian walked to the glass wall, looking down at the city. Now, he said, let me show you why they want you dead over a bottle of wine. He touched a discreet panel on the wall. A section of the black marble slid away, revealing a massive integrated screen. An organizational chart lit up, complex and sprawling. This is Rookhart, he said. It wasn't a map of streets. It was a map of money and influence. I saw his name, Adrian Corvino, at the center of one web. I saw other names, other families, and then I saw the other major player, the Varangian Circle. The bottle you photographed, he said, pointing. It's their new ledger. I looked closer. The lines from Varangian Circle didn't just go to shell companies. They went to the PCASI, the two inspectors at the club. They went to Councilman Rhett Mallory, and they went to a name that made my stomach tighten. FEIB, I whispered, tracing the line. The Federal Economic Integrity Bureau. I thought they were the good guys. Federal agents. They are, Adrian said, his voice hard. They're supposed to be investigating us, the old families. Instead, they're providing federal protection for Varangian, letting them move their product and money through the ports while they use their resources to squeeze us. That's insane. It's business. He looked at me. Now, your turn. That code you saw. What did you find? My hands were steadier now. I pulled out my phone and read the string I'd jotted down. ZCTR 998/Lot 4. It looked like a transfer code. I didn't know where to look. He gestured to a port on his desk. Plug it in. Let's look together. For the next hour, we weren't a mafia boss and a terrified waitress. We were two researchers. His systems tore through firewalls I didn't know existed. We tracked the Northbridge Sellers LLC, the ghost importer from Part 2, and with my code, we found the lockbox. There, I said, pointing. The transfers, they aren't going to a bank. They're going to the Zinnia Trust. A blind charity, Adrian murmured, his eyes narrowing. Controlled by, of course, Rhett Mallory. So the wine isn't just wine, I said, the pieces clicking into place. It's a high-tech ledger. The NFC tag, it's the key that verifies the transfer from the Zinnia Trust. They're not just smuggling wine, Cassia. They're smuggling the payment system on the wine, and you just stumbled into the middle of their exchange. A heavy silence filled the room. He knew. I knew. I wasn't just a witness. I was a liability. Rafa will take you to the safe apartment, he said, his voice all business again. It's downstairs. You'll stay there. We were walking toward the private elevator when Rafa, who'd been standing silent as a statue by the door, spoke up. Boss, we have a problem. What is it? The car, the one I dissuaded last night. It's back, in the garage. Adrian's entire posture changed. He went from a CEO to something predatory. They're that arrogant they'd follow me home. Worse, Rafa said, looking at the security feed on his phone. They're not after you. They're waiting by the guest elevator. Waiting for me. Before I could process it, a new sound reached us. Even here, 50 floors up. It wasn't loud. It was a deep, metallic whumph that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. An alarm, muted and polite, chimed from Adrian's desk. Fire suppression activated. Parking level P4, a calm electronic voice announced. A warning, Rafa said, his hand already inside his jacket. A sloppy one, Adrian countered. They're trying to scare me. Get him out of here. Rafa, use the service tunnels. I'll meet you. No, I said, my voice shaking. They did that because of me. I'm not cargo. Adrian looked at me, a flicker of something annoyance, respect in his eyes. Fine, you're not cargo. You're with me. Rafa, plan B. We moved. We didn't run. We walked, fast, through a door I thought was a closet, into a steel-lined service hallway. We were heading for a different elevator bay when we heard the sound of shattering glass from the main lobby below. They're getting bold, Adrian muttered. We were in the concrete stairwell now, the smell of smoke and burnt chemicals drifting up. The small explosion had been on P4, but they'd sent a team up to the lobby. We emerged on P2, a different garage level. Rafa was already there, the Maybach idling. We were almost to the car when a second, smaller device went off, this one much closer. It wasn't a bomb. It was a concussion grenade, designed to disorient. The crack was deafening. It blew out the windows of a parked SUV 20 feet away. Glass and shrapnel rained down on the concrete. I didn't even have time to scream. Adrian moved faster than I could have imagined. He didn't just push me down. He enveloped me, one arm hooked around my waist, pulling me hard against his chest, his other hand covering the back of my head as he spun, turning his back to the flying glass. I was pressed against him, my face buried in the wool of his coat, my ears ringing. The world was just the percussive tink-tink-tink of glass hitting the ground and the solid, immovable wall of his body. He smelled warm, not of cologne, but of something rich and clean, like amber and pressed linen. It was over in 2 seconds. He didn't let go immediately. I could feel his heart hammering against my cheek. Or maybe it was mine. Are you hurt? His voice was a low rumble in his chest. No, I managed to say, my voice muffled. I don't think so. He slowly released me, his hands steady on my shoulders, scanning me for injuries. You are, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He looked confused. I pointed to the back of his hand. A thin, angry red line was welling up. A piece of flying metal or glass from the car chassis had sliced him. He hadn't even noticed. He'd been too busy shielding me. It's just a scratch, he dismissed. Let's go, boss, Rafa yelled, holding the car door open. Upstairs, in the fortress of his office, the adrenaline finally hit me. I sank into a leather chair, my knees weak. Adrian went to his private bathroom, a room bigger than my entire apartment, and grabbed the first aid kit from under the marble sink. He started to unwrap a bandage, his movements quick but clumsy with his left hand. Here, I said, standing up, let me... He stopped. I took the antiseptic wipe from him. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from something else. Sit, I said, amazed at the authority in my own voice. He actually obeyed, perching on the edge of his massive desk. I stood between his knees. The distance was intimate, clinical. I focused on the cut. This might sting, I said, dabbing at the blood. He didn't even flinch. He just watched my face. The air in the room was too thick, too quiet. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I concentrated on applying the bandage, my fingers brushing his skin. You're afraid, he whispered. I stopped, my hands hovering over his. I looked up. His face was only inches away. I could see the dark, intricate pattern of his eyes. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. But he prompted, but not of you. The tension snapped, or maybe it just changed. He didn't move, but his gaze dropped, just for a second, to my mouth. Bad news! Rafa's voice from the doorway made us both jump, and I snatched my hands back. Adrian stood, his face instantly recomposing into a mask of command. What? Rafa pointed to the news feed Adrian had been watching earlier. Councilman Rhett Mallory. The gala, it's not just a party. Our source says the PCASI are planning to present a case of that 1998 Barolo to Mallory and the FEIB director, a gift to be tested by the city's elite. My stomach nodded. The coated bottles. Exactly, Adrian said, his eyes dark. They're not just moving the wine, they're passing the keys. We need one of those bottles. Cassia, we need that chip. And we need the label it's attached to. Intact. A cold dread settled over me. What are you? You can't be. You want me to go? I need a sommelier, he said, his voice flat. I need someone who can get close to that wine. Someone who can talk their way into the service area. Swap a label on a multi-$1,000 vintage bottle in the middle of a high-security party and not have anyone notice until it's too late. He was asking me to be his spy, to walk right back into the fire. I'm not your soldier, Adrian. I'm not Rafa. I know, you're not my muscle, you're my expert. I stared at him, at the white bandage stark against his tanned skin. My handiwork. He had bled for me. My mom was sleeping in a safe, clean hotel room because of him. If I do this, I said, my voice low but firm, I have one condition. He waited. His face was unreadable. I'm tired of being grabbed. I'm tired of being pushed. By Dubois, by Mallory, by those men in the alley. You pulled me away from the glass. That was fine. That was instinct. That was saving me. But this, I motioned to the screen, this is a choice. My choice. You give me an order, I'll follow it. But any command that involves my body, my autonomy, it has to be my call, my final say. You have to respect that completely. He didn't hesitate. His gaze was intense, unwavering. Always, he said, his voice so low it was almost a vow. There are no exceptions to that rule. Cassia, not with me. The night before the gala, he took me to a private bar on the tower's 50th floor. It was empty. Just us and a single bartender who vanished after setting out 2 glasses and 3 different bottles of Barolo. Show me where, he said. The gala will be chaotic. You'll have seconds. I'm the guest, he said, surprising me by sitting at the bar. You're the sommelier. Impress me. It started as a lesson. I fell back into my training, my hands suddenly steady. Good evening, sir. The 1998, I presented the bottle. I went through the ritual, the foil, the cork. I'll need a distraction, I murmured, my back to him, practicing the feel of a small, sharp blade I'd use to lift the label, and I'll need a decoy bottle. Same vintage, same shape, already empty. Rafa will create the distraction. The bottle will be waiting. He took the glass I poured. What do you smell? He asked, swirling it. You tell me, I replied, my professional mask slipping on. He lifted the glass, inhaled deeply, his eyes closing for a second. I smell oak and rain. I smiled, a real smile. You're listening. I'm trying. The air changed. The lesson was over. The jazz from some unseen speaker was a faint, slow heartbeat. He stood up, walking around the bar until he was standing next to me. He was close. Closer than in the bathroom. I could feel the heat from his body and that clean, amber scent. You're safe here, he said, his voice quiet. I know. He lifted his hand, not to my face, not to my hair. He just gently touched my shoulder, his fingers resting on the fabric of my shirt, a simple, grounding touch, but it sent a jolt straight through me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I watched his eyes drop, just for a second, to my mouth. He leaned in, slowly. I didn't pull away. I found myself leaning in, too, my body acting on an impulse I didn't recognize. We were a hair's breadth from a kiss. I could feel his breath on my lips. And he stopped. He pulled back, just an inch, his eyes holding mine. The control he had was terrifying and strangely, infuriatingly respectful. When you want it, Cassia, he whispered, his voice rough. You say it. I don't guess. He stepped away, breaking the spell, leaving me breathless. Rafa took me to my safe room an hour later. It was a full apartment 10 floors below Adrian's, with sweeping views and furniture that didn't smell like cabbage. It was beautiful. It was a gilded cage. I locked the door, a heavy, solid deadbolt that made my old one look like a joke. I walked to the window, looking out at the rain. I put my hand on my chest, right over my heart. It was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm like the rain against the glass. I was his prisoner. I was his asset. I was his sommelier. But the man who had just respected my condition to the point of refusing to kiss me wasn't a captor. He was something else. I was being protected by the most dangerous man in Rookhart, and the truth was, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just terrified. I was, God help me, attracted, and that, I realized, was far more dangerous than any explosion. The Rookhart Glass Museum wasn't a building, it was a statement. The entire structure was cantilevered over the icy black water of the Rookhart River, a monument of steel and glass that looked like it had been carved from a glacier. The gala was in the main hall, a vast, cavernous space where massive chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, refracting the city lights into a million fractured stars. The air was filled with the murmur of old money, the clinking of glasses, and the thin, reedy sound of a string quartet. I hated it. It was the velvet lantern on a larger, colder, and more honest scale. I wasn't Cassia Wynne, waitress from Ravenblock. I was staff, wearing a crisp military-style white jacket with black piping, my hair pulled back so tight it made my temples ache. Rafa had given me the uniform, a small, razor-sharp ceramic blade for cutting foil, he'd said with a blank face, a decoy empty bottle, and a simple instruction. The wine is in the main service pantry. You have a 30-minute window before the main presentation. I kept my head down, moving along the perimeter of the room, my service tray held high. I saw them all. Councilman Rhett Mallory, his silver hair glinting, accepting compliments, his hand lingering just a little too long on a congresswoman's elbow. And standing next to him, the real shark, was Sloan Hargrave, the director of the FEIB. He was the opposite of Mallory's oily charm. He was thin, precise, and wore a suit that looked like it had been pressed by a machine. He had the pale, passionless eyes of a man who saw the world as a spreadsheet. He and Mallory were shaking hands, a public display of the unholy alliance Adrian had shown me on the screen. Then I saw Adrian. He wasn't hiding. He was the center of his own gravitational pull. He was talking to a woman whose name I knew from the society pages, Isolde Crane. She was tall, impossibly elegant in a severe, kingly way, and she ran the Corvino family's legitimate shipping interests. She was laughing, her hand resting possessively on Adrian's arm. A small, sharp pang one I had no right to feel shot through me. This was his world. These were his people. I was just staff. His eyes, dark and unreadable, lifted from Isolde's face and swept the room. They passed over me, paused for a fraction of a second so brief no one could have possibly noticed, and then moved on. The message was clear. He sees me. He's watching. I slipped through the staff-only door. The service pantry was a blast of noise and heat. Chefs in tall white hats shouted orders. Waiters rushed in and out. This was my world. I knew this chaos. "You're the temp sommelier," a stressed catering manager barked at me. "Yes, ma'am, for the Barolo presentation." "Thank God. It's over there. Don't touch it until Mallory gives the signal. It's some political thing." She pointed to a gleaming, temperature-controlled cart. On it sat a single, unopened wooden case. Barolo, 1998. I waited. My chance came when a waiter dropped an entire tray of appetizers. In the ensuing chaos of yelling and clattering plates, I moved to the cart. My hands, which had been so steady during my practice with Adrian, were now slick with sweat. You only owe it to yourself to survive. I opened the case. 6 bottles, each one with that wrong label, that hidden tag. I took out my decoy empty bottle and placed it on my tray. I took one of the full, coated bottles. I looked at the label, the one I'd seen in the photo. It was exactly as I'd practiced. My ceramic blade was in my palm. I didn't have time to be delicate, to steam it. I just needed the tag. I slid the blade under the paper, right where I knew the tag was. I lifted. "What do you think you're doing?" I froze. It was one of the PCASI agents from the Velvet Lantern, the smirking one. He was in his same ill-fitting suit, holding a clipboard. "I'm preparing the wine for service," I said, my voice amazingly calm. I kept my hand over the label, the blade still hidden. "That's a secured asset," he sneered, grabbing the bottle from me. "We're doing a surprise food safety inspection. This whole area is contaminated." He was with a partner who immediately started opening cabinets, looking for me, for my decoy. "This is ridiculous," the catering manager shouted. "We were cleared." "Our new readings say otherwise?" The agent's eyes were locked on me. "We're going to have to inspect all your tools, sweetheart, and this cart, and anything you've brought with you." This was it. They'd been tipped off. They knew someone was coming for the bottle. And they knew it was me. They were going to search me, find the blade, find the decoy, and it would all be over. I saw Sloan Hargrave, the FEIB director, enter the pantry, his face a mask of annoyance at the delay. I had no choice. I had to use the only weapon I had. I dropped my hands. Leaving the bottle on the cart, I stepped past the PCASI agent and walked directly, respectfully, toward Director Hargrave. "Sir, my apologies for the delay," I said, my voice ringing with a false, bright confidence. "These gentlemen," I gestured to the PCASI agents, "are mistaken." Hargrave's pale eyes landed on me. "And you are?" "Cassia Wynn, sir, the sommelier assigned to this vintage. These men are claiming contamination of a sealed bottle. I believe they are simply uneducated in viticulture. It's a common mistake." The agent's face turned blotchy red. "Uneducated, I ignored him. My eyes locked on Hargrave. "In fact, sir, these gentlemen were just asking me to demonstrate the difference between two varietals. Weren't you?" I turned to the agent. A brilliant, fake smile plastered on my face, as a test of my qualifications. Hargrave, a powerful man who hated being in a hot, loud kitchen, was impatient. "What are you talking about?" "A simple blind test, sir, to prove I know my product." I grabbed 2 open, unlabeled utility bottles from the prep line, a deep red Nebbiolo and a lighter Sangiovese. I poured 2 tasting glasses. The entire kitchen staff was watching. The PCASI agents were trapped. I held the 2 glasses out to Director Hargrave. "Perhaps you can assist. Sir, a man of your refined palate, can you tell me which one is the Nebbiolo, the grape of this very Barolo, and which is the Tuscan Sangiovese? It's the terroir. One smells of tar and roses, the other of cherry and earth. It's unmistakable." I was bluffing my ass off. Hargrave stared at the 2 identical-looking red liquids. He was a federal director, a politician. He wasn't a wine drinker, he was a power broker. He couldn't possibly know, but the press, who had followed him to see what the delay was, were now crowded in the doorway, cameras raised. He couldn't admit he didn't know. He took a glass, swirled it awkwardly, and sniffed. "This one," he said, pointing to the Sangiovese. "This is the Barolo grape, obviously." A dead, heavy silence. I smiled, my face aching. "My apologies, Director, that's the Sangiovese. The cherry is the giveaway." I turned to the press. "A common error. The other one, and with its complex tannic structure, is the Nebbiolo. As I was saying, these bottles are perfectly, professionally handled." A few of the reporters snickered. Sloan Hargrave's face went from pale to Arctic white. He had just been made to look like a fool in front of the media by a waitress. "These men are done here," Hargrave said, his voice a low, lethal hiss directed at the PCASI agents. "Get out, now!" The agents, humiliated and furious, had no choice. They gave me one last look of pure venom and retreated. Hargrave turned and stormed out of the pantry, the reporters following him like pilot fish. The catering manager just stared at me. Wow. The kitchen erupted in noise again, but I wasn't clear. I still needed the chip. As if on cue, from the main hall, there was a loud single pop like a gunshot, followed by a wave of applause and laughter. I craned my neck. Through the doorway, I could see Raffaletto, Adrian's man, holding a champagne saber. He had just sliced the top off a magnum of champagne in a perfect theatrical arc, sending the cork flying. He was creating the real distraction. All eyes, including the catering managers, went to the show. It was my only chance. I turned back to the cart. My hands were finally steady. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. I lifted the label I'd already started. The NFC tag was right there. I used the ceramic blade, not to slice, but to delicately pry open the tag's plastic housing. And there it was, smaller than my pinky nail, a micro SD card. I palmed it, my fingers closing around the tiny, sharp-edged piece of plastic. I swapped the full, now defanged bottle for my empty decoy and pressed the paper label back down. I quickly swapped the real label onto the empty decoy and hid it on my tray. The entire switch had taken maybe 7 seconds. "Let's get that wine prepped," the manager yelled, turning back. "Yes, ma'am." I moved out of the pantry, my heart hammering a victory rhythm. I had it. I had the chip. I just had to get to the service exit, where Rafa would have a car. I was in the marble corridor, just past the coat check, almost to the exit. The sound of the gala was a dull roar behind me. "Ma'am." I turned. A museum security guard, but he wasn't. His uniform was too new. His radio earpiece a different model from the others. His eyes were cold and flat, Varangian. "You dropped this," he said, holding up nothing. "I don't think—" He grabbed my arm, hard. His fingers were like steel bands. "Not here," he hissed, and shoved me, hard, through an unmarked door into a dark, narrow hallway. The door clicked shut, plunging us into silence. "The chip," he snarled, shoving me against the wall. The back of my head hit the drywall with a thud. "Give it to me, or I break your arm. They said not to mark your face, but they didn't say anything about your arm." He twisted my wrist. I cried out, a small, sharp sound. The micro SD was still in my other hand, a sweaty, secret fist. "I don't know." He raised his other hand to hit me. He never got the chance. The door opened and closed in a whisper of air. Adrian. The guard didn't even have time to turn. Adrian didn't say a word. He didn't throw a punch. He moved like smoke. His left hand shot out and grabbed the guard's raised wrist. His right hand clamped onto the guard's shoulder. There was a sound of a click and a grunt. In a single, fluid, terrifyingly fast motion, Adrian had spun the man around, slammed his arm against the steel handrailing of the service stairs, and locked his wrist to it with a pair of black handcuffs. It was over in one breath. The guard was trapped, cuffed to the railing, his face a mask of shock and rage. Adrian hadn't even broken a sweat. He looked at the man, his eyes cold. "She's with me. Tell your boss. He knows who I am." He turned to me. The hallway was dead silent. I was leaning against the wall, my whole body shaking so badly I could barely stand. The adrenaline from the tasting, the theft, and the attack hit me all at once. Adrian stepped in front of me, blocking the trapped guard from my view. His face softened from stone to concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my teeth chattering. He looked at my hand, the one the guard had twisted. Then he looked at my other hand, still clenched in a fist. He didn't ask what was in it. He knew. He saw I was shaking. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch my face. He didn't violate the rule I'd set. Instead, he slowly, gently, put his warm hand on the outside of my forearm, just above the wrist. His thumb stroked the skin once, a steady, grounding, non-invasive touch. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't intimate. It was just here, a solid wall I could lean on. "You did well, Cassia," he whispered. "You did more than well. Rafa is waiting at the north exit. Go now." I fled. Rafa had me in the back of the Maybach before my pulse had even slowed. As we pulled away from the museum, my phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. "They know." I looked down at my clenched fist. I opened it. The tiny black micro SD card sat on my palm, holding 1,000 secrets. The game was over. The rules had changed. I wasn't just a witness or a sommelier or a girl he was protecting. I was the one who had the key, and now every single player Varangian, the FEIB, and God knows who else knew it. Rafa didn't take me to Sable Tower. He didn't take me back to my gilded cage apartment. He drove, he left the city, the Maybach a silent ghost slipping through the network of highways, moving north. The text from Adrian, they know, was burning a hole in my pocket. The micro SD card was a lump of lead in my fist. After an hour, Rafa exited onto a dark industrial access road, pulling into the shadow of an abandoned warehouse. Another vehicle was already there, dark and imposing, its engine a low thrum, a black Range Rover caked in mud. Adrian got out of the driver's side. He wasn't in his gala suit. He was dressed like he had been in the alley, dark, practical, formidable. "Give Rafa the chip," he ordered, opening the passenger door for me. "He'll run a decoy trace back to the city. We're going dark." I hesitated, my fist clenched. "Cassia, the chip." I dropped the tiny piece of plastic into Rafa's waiting hand. He nodded once, a silent mountain, and got back into the Maybach. I slid into the Range Rover. The door closed with a heavy, pressurized thunk. We drove for hours. We didn't talk. I watched the world outside the windshield transform. The cold rain of Rookhart turned to sleet, which pinged against the glass. Then, as we climbed into the foothills of the northern range, the sleet softened into thick, heavy, silent snow. The city, the gala, the FEIB, that monster in the hallway, it all felt like a different lifetime, a million miles away. We left the main highway for a secondary road, and then finally onto a private, unmarked logging trail that the Rover handled without effort. The snow was a foot deep, unmarked, pristine. We were the only people on Earth. Stonefinch Lodge wasn't a lodge. It was a fortress made of timber and glass, perched on a mountainside, invisible from any road. It was all sharp angles, dark cedar and glass, designed to blend into the rock and shadow. Inside, it was Spartan. A massive, cold stone fireplace dominated the main room, polished concrete floors, leather furniture. This wasn't a home, it was a bolt hole. "Rafa will watch the access road. No one gets in or out without him knowing," Adrian said, dropping a heavy duffel bag by the door. He didn't seem tired, he seemed coiled. "The pantry is stocked. We wait here until you crack that chip." He set up a powerful, hardened laptop on a heavy oak table. Rafa had apparently relayed the chip to another man, who had brought it up the mountain an hour before us. It was already plugged in. "It's encrypted," Adrian said, his voice flat. "My tech guys say it's a non-standard algorithm. They can't get in." I sat down, my mind still buzzing from the gala. I looked at the screen. The tech guys were wrong. It wasn't encrypted. It was locked. The screen showed a single file. When I clicked it, it didn't ask for a password. It showed a picture, a high-resolution, microscopic image of wine sediment. "I know this," I whispered, leaning in. "They're not using a password, they're using a key, a visual key." Adrian stood behind me. I could feel his presence, a solid, warm shadow. "What do you mean?" This is a spectrograph of a wine's chemical signature," as I said, my fingers flying over the trackpad, pulling up reference charts I'd memorized for my level 2. "They're using the decay, the rate of tannin oxidation. Look, the file timestamps are in a cycle. They're using the unique spectral fingerprint of an aging wine as a one-time pad. It changes every day." "So you can't brute force it," he murmured. "The password is organic. It's alive." "Exactly. They're not just smuggling wine. They're using the wine itself as the key. We don't just need the code. We need to know what bottle they're using as the lock." "The 1998 Barolo," he said. "No," I said, thinking. "That's the ledger. That's the data. They wouldn't use the same bottle for the lock. That's too easy. It has to be something else, something only the inner circle would know." It was hopeless. We were locked out. The next day, the snow was waist deep. The sky was a heavy, oppressive white. We were truly cut off. While I worked, trying to cross-reference the spectral image with known vintages, Adrian taught me. They'll find us, he said, see his voice blunt. Rafa's good, but Hargrave has federal resources. They'll use satellites, thermal imaging. They know we're in the state. You need to know how to see them coming. He took me out onto the wide wooden deck, the air so cold it stung my lungs. The car mirror, he said. You don't look for a car following you. You look for a car that isn't following you, one that stays 2 or 3 cars back, that speeds up when you do, that makes the same 3 right turns. He made me walk the perimeter of the lodge, your pace. If someone is walking behind you, don't look back. Change your speed. If they match you, they're a tail. Stop, tie your shoe. If they find a reason to stop, 2, you run. He taught me hand signals, silent ways to point out a threat. He was treating me like a soldier, not a sommelier. He was treating me like an equal. That night, the temperature plummeted. The wind howled through the pines, a low, mournful sound. We were in the kitchen, the only truly warm room in the lodge. We should eat, he said, pulling ingredients from the pantry. It wasn't luxury. It was simple. A box of pasta, a can of crushed tomatoes, garlic, an onion. He moved with the same economy of motion he'd used to cuff that guard, chopping the onion, his shoulders broad under a simple black sweater. I found a bottle of wine on the rack, a cheap Montepulciano. It's not a 1998, I said, holding it up. He glanced over, a small smile touching his lips. He took the bottle, opened it without ceremony, and poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me. Good wine, Cassia, he said, his voice quiet over the sound of the wind. Is wine that tells the story of today? Tonight this is perfect. We ate by the fire, sitting on the concrete hearth, the silence comfortable. The panic of the gala was fading, replaced by this strange, insulated reality. Just us and the snow. And then the light sputtered and died. The hum of the refrigerator, the fan in the heater, the soft light from the kitchen all gone. The only sound was the screaming wind. The only light was the dying orange glow from the fireplace. We were plunged into a primal, freezing darkness. I gasped. My breath hitched. It wasn't the dark that scared me. It was the cold. It was the sudden, absolute lack. It was the smell of my Raven Block apartment when the heat had been shut off. It was the terror of my mom shivering under 2 coats, the visceral, gnawing panic of being poor and invisible and without. I was shaking. I wrapped my arms around myself, my teeth chattering, but it wasn't from the cold. It was from memory. Cassia, his voice was close, a dark rumble in the dark. It's just the generator. It'll kick in. But it didn't. Cassia was in front of me. I couldn't see his face. Breathe. I can't. It's too cold, I whispered, the panic rising, irrational and overwhelming. I'll get the fire. I heard him move, the scrape of the iron grate, the crackle of new kindling. He was working quickly. In a moment, new light, weak but growing, flickered in the room. He came back to me. I was still huddled on the hearth, shaking. I could feel the heat of his body before he even got close. He didn't touch me, and he just loomed, a solid presence. Then he disappeared for a second and returned. He draped something heavy and soft over my shoulders, a thick, heavy wool blanket. He sat on the hearth, not next to me, but near enough to be a barrier against the dark. I've got it, he said, his voice soft. It's just the wind. I'll get more wood in a minute. You're not cold. You're safe. And I believed him. Hours later, the generator was still dead. We were living by firelight. We were in the kitchen, which was now lit by 2 thick emergency candles. I was standing by the useless electric stove, my hands wrapped around a mug of cold water, trying to stop the last of the tremors. He was just there, standing by the counter, watching me. The tension from the bar, the night before the gala, was back. It filled the small, cold room, thick and tangible, warring with the wind. He took a step, then another. He stopped in front of me, close enough that the candlelight shadowed his face, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to look at him. You're not afraid of the dark, he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I whispered. "I'm afraid of what happens in it." He didn't move. He just held my gaze. I felt that strange pull again, the one from Sable Tower, the one that had nothing to do with fear or gratitude. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe I did. My hand, the one not holding the mug, I raised it. Slowly, I put the mug down. I raised my hand and I touched his face. My fingertips grazed the rough, dark stubble on his jaw. He froze. His breath hitched. He closed his eyes, just for a second, and leaned into my touch, like a man starving for something he'd never admit. "Cassia," he breathed, his voice rough. He leaned in, and he kissed me. It was slow, hesitant. At first, it was just pressure and warmth in the cold room. A question. It wasn't the kiss of a boss or a captor. It was the kiss of a man who was just as lost in this storm as I was. And then, just as he had at the bar, he stopped. He pulled back, just an inch, just enough to look at me. His eyes were black in the candlelight, his pupils wide. His hand was on the counter beside me, his knuckles white, as if he was holding himself back. "Do you want to continue?" he asked. His voice was a low, rough growl. My rule, my condition, he was honoring it, even now. My voice was gone. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a small, jerky movement. That was all he needed. This time, there was no hesitation. The dam broke. His hand came up, not to my shoulder, but his fingers tangled in the hair at the nape of my neck, tilting my head, his other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me away from the counter and hard against him. I gasped into his mouth. My hands flew up, grabbing his sweater, his shoulders, anything to hold on. He walked me backwards, slowly, deliberately, until my back pressed against the warm, solid wooden wall of the kitchen. It was a cascade of new sensations, the scrape of his stubble against my chin, the heat of his mouth, confident and searching, the solid, grounding presence of his body against mine, a human shield against the cold and the wind. He smelled like firewood, and that clean, amber scent, and something that was just him. His lips moved from my mouth, trailing fire along my jaw to the sensitive skin just behind my ear. "Tell me," he whispered, his breath hot against my neck, making me shiver. "Tell me what you want." "Don't stop," I whispered back, my voice trembling. It was a silent conversation then, a tango of breath and touch. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was trying to escape, to meet his... He held me. His hands firm but not rough, his body a solid wall. It was a promise, a surrender and a claim, all in one breath. We were just two people, in a storm, finally finding an anchor in each other. The next morning, the storm had passed. The generator was back on. The world outside was a silent, blinding white. We were drinking coffee at the oak table. I felt different, not fragile, not owned, seen. He had a shadow of a beard, and his hair was mussed. He looked younger, almost peaceful. I reached out, bolder now, and touched the stubble on his cheek. "Good morning," I smiled. He caught my hand. He didn't just hold it. He turned it over and pressed his lips to the inside of my wrist, a soft, warm, definite kiss. It wasn't a claim. It was a seal. I turned back to the laptop, my skin humming. "I think I know," I said. "Last night, the wine, the cheap wine." "The Montepulciano?" "You said good wine tells the story of today. What if the key isn't a rare vintage? What if it's the opposite? What if it's the wine of the day, the house red at the club where Varangian meets?" I typed in the spectral profile for a cheap, table-grade Montepulciano. The file clicked open. We both stared. It wasn't just a ledger. It was a complete, detailed shadow book. Dates, shipping manifests, transfer amounts, all feeding directly to Mallory's Zinnia Trust. And a list of payments, bribes, protection money. And a code name, moorhen. "A moorhen," I said. "It's a water bird, like a dock bird." Adrian came to stand behind me. I could feel the tension roll off him, the peace of the morning vanishing. Moorhen, he said, his voice hard. That's an internal designation. My father used it for his top man at the ports. I looked up at him. His face was stone. You think Moorhen is one of your people, an informant? He was silent for a long time, staring at the screen, at the name, at the betrayal. I don't know, he said, his voice flat, but he's deep inside my organization, and he's working for Hargrave and the Varangian Circle. He was wrestling with it, the brutal implications, the man who had just held me, who had asked for permission. He was gone, replaced by the Corvino boss. I put my hand on his arm, the one he'd kissed. Adrian, I said, my voice steady. If it is, then we need the truth even more. The intimacy of the snowstorm, the warmth of the fire, the promise in his kiss. It evaporated the second we hit the Rookhart city limits. The man who had held me in the lodge was gone, replaced by the Corvino boss. He was silent, his jaw tight, the name Moorhen, a palpable weight in the cab of the Range Rover. The betrayal had focused him into something sharp and cold. We didn't go back to Sable Tower. We went to the docks, to the source, Northbridge Cellars, LLC. The fog was so thick it felt like we were driving into the ocean. It clung to everything, muffling the sounds of the port, tasting of salt and industrial rot. Rafa was back, a silent shadow at Adrian's side. We were parked in a dead-end alley, the warehouse looming in front of us, a massive, corrugated steel box. This is the plan, Adrian said, his voice a low monotone. All business. He was studying a tablet displaying a live feed of the warehouse's security cameras. There are 4 cameras on the perimeter. They're on a standard 10-second sweep. The east side camera, the one by the loading dock, has a glitch. It lags, a full 2 seconds on its reset. 2 seconds isn't enough to get through a door, I said, my heart starting its familiar, panicked rhythm. It is for Rafa, Adrian said, but the door is secondary. The real problem is the thermal sensors. The entire building is wired for heat. They'll know we're inside before we take 5 steps. That's my job, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I held up a small, pressurized canister. This is sulfur dioxide. We use it to sterilize empty wine barrels. It fogs heavily when it hits humid air. Like this. I nodded toward the soupy fog. To a thermal camera. It's not 3 human-shaped heat signatures. It's a hot, dense, chemical cloud. They'll assume it's a fumigation. Or a barrel leak. It buys us time. Good, he said, a flicker of approval in his dark eyes. Rafa, the lock, Cassia, the thermals. I'll get the data. We're in and out in 10 minutes. I moved first. I crept along the wet pavement until I was just under the camera's blind spot. I waited. On Adrian's signal, a single click over the earpiece, I sprayed the canister, aiming the nozzle at the thermal sensor. The sulfur hit the fog and instantly blossomed, a thick, acrid cloud that rolled up the side of the building. Thermal feed is white, and Adrian's voice said in my ear, Rafa, go. Rafa moved like a panther, crossing the open space in that 2-second window. He wasn't at the door. He was at the conduit above it. He clamped a small, black box with 2 alligator clips onto the thick cable. It's a smart lock, he muttered, more to himself than to us. Keypad's a decoy. It's digital. He tapped the box, creating a voltage leak, forcing a hard reset. We waited. 10 seconds, 20. The keypad, dark a moment ago, suddenly flashed, every number lighting up at once. Then it went dark. A heavy click echoed in the fog. The magnetic lock was disengaged. Adrian was on me. Let's go! We slipped inside. The air was cool and still, and the smell. It was the first thing that hit me. It was wrong. It wasn't the smell of a warehouse. It wasn't the smell of wine. It was the smell of a perfume counter. It was vanilla and fake butter and something vaguely fruity. What is this? I whispered. Adrian hit a light switch. The factory floor flooded with harsh, fluorescent light. It wasn't a wine warehouse. It was a laboratory. Massive stainless steel vats lined the walls, but instead of cooling jackets, they were fitted with intricate nozzles and injectors, a chemistry set from hell. I saw canisters labeled with chemical names, diacetyl, ethyl acetate. I don't understand, Adrian said, his hand on the weapon tucked at the small of his back. Where's the wine? They're not storing it, I said, a wave of cold, sick realization washing over me. I walked toward a complex machine in the center of the room, a scent mixer 5000. They're faking it. I pointed to a pallet of cheap, unlabeled bottles in the corner. They're not smuggling $1,000 bottles. They're smuggling this swill, and then they're using this equipment. I tapped the vat. They're mixing artificial flavor and aroma compounds. They're creating the scent of old wine. This is a counterfeit operation. This is how they're washing millions. The labels, so Adrian said, his eyes scanning, processing. They're creating the bottles, the wine, and the smart labels. The real ledgers have to be here, I said, spotting a printing station in a glass-walled office. The paper, the micro SDs, it's all here. Find the paper, Adrian ordered, moving to the server terminal. I'll find the manifests. I need to match the seal numbers from the Zinnia Trust. He jacked a hard drive into their system, his fingers flying, bypassing their firewalls. The progress bar for the download was agonizingly slow. I ran to the printing station. Rolls of the high-gloss label paper were stacked, ready to go. I grabbed a sample, noting the specific, strange watermark. This was the physical proof. Click! The fluorescent light snapped off. We were plunged into absolute darkness. Then, a single, pulsing red emergency light began to strobe, bathing the entire factory in a sickening, rhythmic pulse of red and black. No alarm bell, no siren, just the light. Silent alarm. Rafa's voice was a flat stone in the dark. He was already at the door. We're made. How? Adrian's voice was a low growl. He ripped the hard drive from the server, not waiting for the download to finish. Moorhen, I whispered. It had to be. They knew we'd come here. We've got company, Rafa said, peering through the slats of the loading dock door. Heavy company. Headlights cut through the fog outside. Doors slammed. Varangian, Adrian asked, moving to join him. Worse, Rafa stepped back. I'm counting 6 vehicles, 3 black sedans, Varangian for sure, and 3 blue and white, official. It's the MRT. The Metropolitan Racketeering Task Force. I breathed, my blood running cold. They're here with Varangian Hargrave's men, public and private. This is the trap, Adrian said, his voice grim. They're not just here to stop us. They're here to catch us. MRT, this is a federal task force, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker outside. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands in the air. Rafa drew his weapon, the sound of the slide racking echoing in the cavernous room. Adrian put a hand on his forearm. No, Adrian said, his voice absolute. Boss, they're not giving us a choice. No one shoots first, Adrian commanded. They want a firefight. They want to pin this on us. Call it resisting arrest. Take us out. We don't give them the kill shot. Then how do we get out? Rafa's frustration was clear. They have the only door. They're coming in. We could hear them, the sound of heavy boots on the gravel outside. Adrian looked around the dark, red pulsing room. He looked at the vats. He looked at me. Cassia, your world. How do we get out? He wasn't asking me to fight. He was asking me to think. My eyes scanned the machinery. The vats, the tubing, the gauges, the large white tanks in the corner, the labels, the sparkling wine. I said, what? It's a counterfeit operation. They're faking everything to fake champagne. You need bubbles. They're not going to use the traditional method. They're using, I pointed to the massive frosted tanks, forced carbonation. Those are industrial CO2 tanks. Adrian understood instantly. The gas. Rafa, I said, my voice shaking but firm, that large red wheel valve. It controls the main line to the vats. I'm going to open the relief nozzles. When I yell, I need you to open that valve, all the way. What will it do? Adrian asked, his eyes intense, trusting me. It's what I did at the gala, but on an industrial scale, it's not smoke, it's heavier than air carbon dioxide. It will react with the humidity from the fog. It will create a blinding, freezing white mist. They won't be able to see their hands in front of their faces. It will block their line of sight, create chaos, and stop this from escalating into a gunfight. Do it. I ran to the vats, twisting open the relief valves, a series of small hisses. "They're at the door," Rafa yelled. We heard the sound of a battering ram hitting the metal. "Now, Rafa," I screamed. Rafa spun the heavy iron wheel. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched, overwhelming hiss that drowned out everything. A massive white cloud of freezing CO2 erupted from the vats, instantly blanketing the floor. It wasn't fog, it was a blizzard. "What the hell is this?" we heard a man yell from the doorway. Gas. "Hey, it's not flammable," Adrian yelled over the roar. "The bottling line, it's our only way out. It leads to the loading dock." He grabbed my hand, his grip like iron. We plunged into the whiteout, crouching low, moving toward the clattering sound of the conveyor belt. The red emergency light pulsed through the fog, turning the world into a chaotic nightmare of red and white. We reached the line. It was moving, carrying empty bottles toward the loading dock. "Up go," Adrian yelled, vaulting onto the moving belt. He turned, his hand outstretched for me. I put my hand in his, hiked up my knee, and my foot slipped on the wet metal frame. I fell forward, a cry ripped from my throat. He didn't catch me. He snatched me. His other arm whipped around my waist, yanking me off my feet and crushing me against his chest in one violent, protective motion. The world stopped. The roar of the gas, the clatter of the bottles, the shouts of the MRT, it all faded. It was just us. I was pinned against him, my hands flat on his chest, his arm a band of steel around my waist. We were both breathing hard, our breath misting in the freezing fog, our faces inches apart. His eyes were black, intense, boring into mine. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't the man from the lodge. He was something older, primal. "Move," Rafa's voice shattered the moment. Adrian half lifted, half threw me over the belt and followed in one motion. We ran, stumbling, through the plastic curtains of the loading dock, and into the blinding glare of 20 headlights. They had us. The exit was blocked. The fog was thinning. The MRT, guns raised, formed a semicircle. The Varangian goons hung back, like wolves, smiling. And in the center of it all, standing in the glare of the headlights, was Isolde Crane. She was immaculate, her silver blonde hair pulled back, her face a mask of cold fury. She wasn't in gala attire. She was in a severe, expensive business suit, and she was holding a legal document. She wasn't looking at Adrian. She was looking at me. "Well, Adrian," her voice was sharp, cutting through the standoff. "This is messy, even for you." "Isolde?" Adrian's voice was a low warning. He stepped slightly, putting himself between me and her. "What is this?" "This," she held up the paper, "the warrant, is the end of your little game, an emergency order signed by Director Hargrave's office. All Corvino assets are temporarily seized, pending an investigation into this." She gestured to the warehouse, the armed men, the CO2 still bleeding into the night. She took a step closer, her eyes glittering with a cold, personal hatred aimed entirely at me. "I told you," she whispered, "for him alone, but I heard it. I told you she wasn't worth the trouble. You were a king, and she's dragging you down into the mud with her." The MRT soldiers tensed, ready for the order. The Varangian men were laughing. This was their victory. They had trapped him, and his own partner was here to seal the deal. Adrian didn't look at the guns. He didn't look at the warrant. He looked straight at Isolde. His face was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "I choose my people, Isolde," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was absolute. "You've always known that." Isolde's perfect composure cracked. She looked, just for a second, like he had struck her. A jolt went through me, so powerful it was almost painful. A wave of heat in the freezing fog, in front of his rivals, his enemies, and his own organization. He had Ralph flinch. He had just drawn a line in the sand, and he'd put me on his side of it. But the warmth was followed by a spike of pure, cold ice. I saw the look on Isolde's face change from shock to calculation. I saw the smirks on the Varangian goons widen. They had heard it too. He hadn't just protected me. He had just painted a target on my back for the entire world to see. I was no longer an asset. I was the one thing he wasn't willing to sacrifice. I was his weakness. Isolde Crane's victory at the Northbridge warehouse was a cold, clinical execution. "I choose my people," and Adrian had said, and in that moment the fight had ended. Hargrave's MRT task force lowered their weapons, their expressions confused. This wasn't the violent bust they'd been promised. Isolde, her face a mask of indifferent steel, motioned to the federal agents. "The warrant is clear. This site is now a federal asset. Seize the counterfeit materials. Mr. Corvino, you are temporarily relieved of your operational authority." She had won. She had cut him off at the knees. The Varangian goons, the ones who had been ready for a firefight, looked baffled. Their MRT allies were now just seizing the evidence. The trap had worked, but not in the way they'd expected. "This isn't over, Isolde," Adrian said, his voice low, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me back toward the Range Rover. "Oh, I know," she said, not looking at him. She was looking at me. "It's just getting started." Rafa, Adrian, and I drove away from the scene. No one stopped us. We were no longer a threat. We were just the newly unemployed. The silence in the truck was a living, breathing thing. I had the hard drive in my pocket at the partial download, the only copy, and it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "She won't stop at Northbridge," Adrian said, his voice a flat line. He was staring at the wet streets, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "She'll freeze everything. The accounts, the towers, the holding companies. She's working with Hargrave." "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice small. "Sable Tower isn't safe." "No, we're going to the one place her warrant won't cover, because it doesn't technically exist on any city map." He turned the Rover, heading east. The Riverside warehouse. It was older, a relic from his father's time. A brick monolith squatting on the fog-shrouded banks of the Rookhart River. The wind howled off the water, whistling through the old steel frames, making the sickly yellow sodium lights flicker and buzz. This place smelled of rust, river mud, and faintly of old wine. We got inside, sealing a heavy bank vault-style door behind us. This wasn't a lab, it was a fortress and a data hub. "The hard drive," Adrian commanded, moving to a secure terminal in a glass-walled office. "We have to upload this to the real server, the one she doesn't know about, before she finds it and locks us out." He plugged it in. A progress bar appeared. 5%. "Rafa," Adrian said, "perimeter. Now, they know we have the drive. They know this is the only place we could—" A thud echoed through the building, so powerful it shook the concrete floor. Then another. "They're here," Rafa said, his weapon already in his hand. He didn't even need to look. "Varangian," Adrian snarled. "Hargrave's pets. They're not waiting for a warrant this time. They're here to take the drive and bury us with it." I ran to the security monitors in the office. The yellow sodium lights outside illuminated the scene. Black SUVs. At least a dozen men, armed, fanning out, using old shipping containers for cover. They were advancing on the warehouse. "Rafa, they're pinning you," I said, my voice high, watching as two of Adrian's men were forced back from the main loading dock by a hail of gunfire. "I need to get out there," Adrian said, grabbing his own weapon. "No," I said, my eyes scanning the control panel in the office. It was for inventory. Climate control. "You need to finish that upload. I can help." He looked at me, confused. "Cassia, this isn't a gala." "I know." I pointed to a series of controls labeled barrel room humidification. "This is a wine warehouse. You have to keep the barrels damp. Right to stop evaporation." I slammed my hand down on a large red button labeled manual system purge. A loud hiss echoed from outside the office. On the monitors. I watched as a thick, fine mist, the kind used to keep barrel rooms at 90% humidity, erupted from nozzles along the eaves of the loading dock. It mixed with the fog, creating an instant, impenetrable white wall. "What did you do?" Adrian stared at the screen. "I'm a sommelier. I know how to handle a winery." I grabbed the intercom microphone. "Rafa, they're blind. Move left, your team. Move left. They're concentrated on the south corner." My voice echoed out into the night. On the screen, I saw Rafa and his men, like ghosts in the mist, successfully flanking the Varangian team, forcing them back. We had them. It was working. And then, just as before, a new set of headlights cut through the fog, blue and red this time. Hargrave. He was always one step behind the chaos, ready to clean it up. "Adrian Corvino," his voice, amplified by a loudspeaker, boomed over the wind. "This ends now. You are harboring a fugitive. Send out the woman." My blood went cold. "He's not talking about Isolde," I whispered. "Go to hell, Hargrave!" Adrian yelled back, his voice raw. "Hi! Kisha Wynn is in possession of stolen, fraudulent evidence." Hargrave's voice was sharp, righteous. "She's an accessory to organized crime. This is her fault. Corvino, give her to me, and the Fabe will stand down. I'll let you negotiate with your Varangian friends. Don't, and I'm authorized to come in with the full force of the UAC's government." He was trading me for Adrian's freedom. Adrian grabbed the radio. "You touch her, Hargrave," he said, his voice a low, lethal hiss. "And this entire street turns bloody. That's a promise." I looked at the upload bar. 16%, it was too slow. I looked at the men on the monitors. This was a bloodbath waiting to happen. Because of me, I was the weakness. When you want it, Cassia, you say it, I don't guess. I made my choice. I grabbed the hard drive, unplugging it from the terminal. "Cassia, no." I ignored him. I ran out of the office, onto the exposed loading dock, into the screaming wind and the sickly yellow light. I held the small, black hard drive up in the air. "Director Hargrave," I yelled, my voice ripped away by the wind. "You don't want me. You want this." All the guns Varangian, Phoebe and Corvino pointed at me. Hargrave stepped out of his car, his thin face illuminated. He smiled. He had won. "The problem is," I yelled, my voice shaking, "this drive is currently streaming to a dead man's switch. If I don't enter a code in the next 2 minutes, the entire unedited ledger goes public. To a little independent blog I love, the Civic Sentinel. They adore getting tips about corrupt federal directors. It was the bluff of my life. I was counting on the fact that he was, at his core, a politician." Hargrave froze. His smile vanished. "Give me the drive, Miss Wynn." "Call your men off," I countered. "All of them, yours and your friends." A Varangian goon, impatient and angry, didn't wait for the order. He saw his prize, the ledger, and he saw a Fed about to take it. He raised his rifle. He wasn't aiming at Hargrave. He was aiming at me. I only saw the flash. "Cassia, down!" Adrian's voice was a roar. I dropped, but I heard a sharp thwack and a grunt of pain that wasn't mine. Rafa. I looked over. Rafa, the solid, unmovable mountain, was on one knee. His hand was clutched to his thigh. A dark, ugly stain was spreading over the fabric. The standoff was shattered. The night exploded in a hail of gunfire. I didn't think. I scrambled, low to the ground, toward Rafa, not away from him. "Get out of here," he growled, trying to raise his weapon, but his face was pale with shock. "You're an idiot if you think I'm leaving you," I snapped, yanking off my own jacket, my voice a command. "Pressure, I need pressure. Right here. Put your hand on it and push." He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "Now, Rafa." He obeyed. I tore at the fabric of his pants, my hands covered in his blood. I ripped off my belt, threaded it high around his leg, and twisted, creating a makeshift tourniquet. My voice was steady. My hands were firm. I was the terrified waitress from Ravenblock, performing battlefield surgery in a war zone. "He's stable, we're not, let's go." Adrian was suddenly there, laying down cover fire. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip bruising, and hauled me to my feet. His men are getting him. We're leaving. He dragged me through a heavy steel door I hadn't seen, into a small, dark room. The door slammed shut with the heavy, final thud of a bank vault. The world went silent. We were in the safe room. The air was dead, smelling of old concrete and paper ledgers. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. And then the adrenaline hit, and it was replaced by pure, white-hot rage. "You shouldn't have done that," I said, my voice shaking. "Done what?" he panted, leaning against the door, his weapon still raised. "Saved your life." "No," I shoved him, hard. He stumbled, surprised by my force. "You shouldn't have said it. At the last warehouse, I choose my people. You painted a target on my back. You told every single person here that I'm your weakness." "I was protecting you," he roared back, his face inches from mine, his eyes wild. "That wasn't protection, that was control," I was shouting now, my voice cracking, the tears I'd refused to shed finally coming. "That was you telling Isolde and Hargrave and the whole damn world that I'm the one thing you can't lose. You dragged me into this vault, Adrian, but this isn't a safe room. It's a cage." "I will not," he snarled, advancing on me, backing me into the cold steel wall. "Let you get hurt because of my fight." "It is my fight now," I screamed, slamming my palms against his chest. "You don't get to decide that for me. You don't get to decide anything for me." The argument was raw, ragged, and not about the warehouse. It was about the lodge, the gala, my mother, his promise. He stopped, his whole body rigid. He saw me, really saw me, my face streaked with tears and Rafa's blood. The anger in his face broke, collapsing into something that looked like despair. He slammed his fist against the steel wall next to my head, the clang echoing in the tiny room. "Fine," he whispered, his voice raw. He surged forward. I flinched, expecting him to yell again. He didn't. He kissed me. It wasn't the slow, questioning kiss from the lodge. It was desperate. It was hard. It was a clash of teeth and will. It was a release of all the adrenaline, the fear, and the rage. It was a way of saying, "Shut up, and I'm sorry, and I can't lose you all at once," without a single word. I kissed him back, just as hard, my hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. It broke as fast as it started. We pulled apart, both of us breathless, our foreheads pressed together, the air in the vault electric. "No more lies," I panted, my voice trembling. "Not even the painful ones. We tell each other the truth, from now on." "I promise," he breathed, his eyes closed. "The truth." "Okay." I pulled back, wiping my face, my composure returning, cold and hard. "The truth is, my bluff won't last 10 minutes. We have to upload the rest of this data." He nodded, his boss face snapping back into place. He plugged the hard drive into the vault's secure terminal. "Uploading to the primary server now." We watched the progress bar. It shot up, faster this time, 20%, 30, 50. Then it stopped. It didn't just stop. It flashed red. "Upload blocked by admin. Auth code Morhan." "What?" Adrian's blood ran cold. "He's not just an informant. He has admin access. He's in my system." Another screen flashed, this one from his financial servers. "Asset liquidation protocol initiated. All accounts frozen." "No," Adrian whispered, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his face pale. "No, no, no. He's freezing everything. The accounts, the offshore. Isolde's warrant was just the public face. This is the kill shot." Morhan, the traitor. He was locking Adrian out of his own empire. We were trapped in a vault with no money and an army outside. "Isolde's warrant," I said, my mind racing, latching onto the one detail that didn't fit. "What about it?" Adrian was frantically typing, trying to bypass the block. "The smell," I said, thinking. "When she handed it to you, the paper. It smelled like the labels at Northbridge. That sharp, chemical ink smell. I thought it was just fresh from the FEIB printer." And the spelling," I said, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. I glanced at it. The warrant, it listed your assets. It listed Northbridge Cellars. But Cellars was misspelled. Cellers, with an E. So it's a typo. So I've seen that mistake before, I said, the blood draining from my face. When I was in your office at Sable Tower, that first day, I saw a memo on your desk, a logistics report from the port. It had the same mistake. Cellars. I remember thinking it was odd for a high-level report. Adrian stopped typing. He slowly turned to look at me, his face a mask of dawning, sickening horror. Who wrote that memo? Adrian, who handles the port logistics. He didn't have to answer. We both knew. The port manifests, he said, his voice a hollow echo in the vault. The logistics reports. They're all written by one man, my right hand, the man who's been with my father for 20 years. He whispered the name, and it felt like the vault had lost all its oxygen. Silas Merrick. The name Silas Merrick hung in the air of the vault, thick and toxic, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. It was worse than a gunshot. It was a cancer. Adrian didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at the screen, at the upload blocked message, at the asset liquidation protocol. I could see the betrayal in his shoulders, a physical weight that made him slump just for a second before he straightened, his spine turning to ice. He's been with my father for 20 years, he whispered, his voice hollow. He taught me how to tie a tie. The sound of gunfire outside, which had been a terrifying roar, now seemed distant and unimportant. This was the real wound. Adrian, I said, my voice low and pulling him back. The accounts are freezing. The fight that's just a distraction. This is the kill shot. We can't stay here. Hargrave and Varangian are outside. Isolde has locked the front door. And Moorhen Silas is locking the back. We're done. He looked at me, his eyes black, all the emotion gone, replaced by something cold and absolute. The boss was back. No, he said. He turned from the terminal and ran his hand along a smooth, concrete wall. This place was built by my father. He didn't trust banks, he didn't trust his partners, and he didn't trust his friends. He only trusted two things, concrete and paranoia. He pressed his palm against a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest. There was a low hiss of hydraulics. A 3-foot by 3-foot section of the concrete floor slid away, revealing a dark, narrow ladder descending into blackness, a tunnel. He'll be waiting for us, Adrian said, his voice flat. Hargrave. Silas. He blocked the upload. He knows we're here. He knows about this tunnel. It's the only way out. He'll be at the other end. This isn't a trap. It's a negotiation. He looked at me. I have to go. You can stay here. They'll find you. But Hargrave will take you alive. He needs your testimony. The truth, Adrian, I said, my voice hard, the memory of our promise in the vault still hanging in the air. We tell each other the truth, and the truth is, you're not leaving me here. He didn't argue, and he just nodded, handed me the partial hard drive, and motioned to the hole. After you. We descended into the dark. The tunnel smelled of damp stone, old river water, and rust. It was a 5-minute walk in suffocating silence. The ladder at the other end led up into a wooden floor. I could hear the wind whistling through broken boards above us. We emerged into the ruins of an old chapel, perched on the edge of the river, a mile down from the warehouse. It was abandoned, the roof half gone, the pews smashed to kindling. The only light came from a dozen flickering votive candles, placed in a circle on the altar. And in the center of that circle stood Silas Merrick. He looked smaller than I remembered from Sable Tower. He wasn't the imposing, sharp-suited consigliere. He was just a man, his face gray, his eyes hollowed out by fear. He was holding a pistol, but it was pointed at the floor. He knows, Silas said. His voice was a dry rasp. He was speaking to Adrian. He's here. I put the gun down, Silas, Adrian said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He didn't have his weapon drawn. He didn't need it. His voice was enough. I didn't have a choice. Boss, Silas whispered, his hand shaking. The gun clattered from his fingers onto the stone floor. He was broken. You had a choice every day for 20 years. Silas, Adrian said, stepping out of the shadows, the candlelight flickering on his face. You were family, and you sold us out. For them. He didn't sell you for money, I said, stepping out beside Adrian. Silas looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise. It was his sister, I said, looking at Adrian. Wasn't it the FEIB, Hargrave? They found something on her. Old medical records, a drug charge, something they could use as leverage. Silas started to cry, a dry, ragged, choking sound. Her medical file, she got sick, years ago, to pay for the treatment. She did things, forged prescriptions. They were going to send her to a federal prison. She wouldn't survive. Adrian, she's not strong. So Hargrave offered you a deal, Adrian said, the pieces clicking into place, his face granite. He said he'd bury the file. Silas wept. In exchange for information, small things, at first, shipping schedules, port manifests, then Varangian got involved. They wanted more. They wanted you. They promised to protect her, to give her a new identity, to wipe the slate clean. All I had to do was give them access, give them Morhen. So you froze the account, Adrian said. You turned off the systems. You tried to trap us in the vault. To save you, Silas screamed, his voice cracking. Don't you see they were going to kill you both, Varangian? Hargrave, it was a setup. I had to get you out. I had to get you here, away from them. He collapsed onto a broken pew, his head in his hands. Silence. The only sound was the wind and Silas's awful sobbing. Adrian stared at the man who had been his father's right hand. The betrayal was absolute, but the reasoning, it was tragic. It was human. Adrian slowly, deliberately, reached inside his jacket. He drew his weapon. The click as he chambered around was the loudest sound in the world. Adrian, I said, my hand on his arm. He's right, Adrian said, his voice dead. He betrayed me. He sold me out. But he's family. And we have our own laws. He was going to execute him. Street justice. No. I stepped in front of him, my hands on his chest. Adrian, stop. Look at him. He's not a monster. He's just us. He's me, with my mom's hospital bills. He's a man who was squeezed until he broke. Get out of the way, Cassia, he growled, his eyes fixed on Silas. No, you can't. Don't you see this is what Hargrave wants? He wants you to be the animal. He wants you to be the ruthless mafia boss he tells the world you are. You pull that trigger, Adrian, and he wins. You prove him right. He stared at me, his face a mask of rage, his arms shaking. He was at war with himself. The boss versus the man I'd seen at the lodge. There's another way, Silas stammered, looking up, his face slick with tears and snot. I did what they wanted. I froze your accounts, but I did something else. I did it for me. What? Adrian said, his weapon still raised. Varangian. They don't use banks. Not for their real money. They have a cash house, a physical vault. I'm the one who set up the security. I'm the only one besides their leader who has the access codes. This was it, the bargain. I give my sister, give her to you, Silas pleaded, looking at Adrian. Protect her. Get her away from them. Get her clear, and I'll give you the codes. I'll give you their war chest. Adrian was still, his face torn. He wanted the revenge, the blood, but he needed the money. We take the deal, I said, my voice firm. I wasn't asking. I was telling. Adrian looked at me, his eyes searching my face, then slowly, agonizingly. He lowered his arm. He uncocked the pistol and put it away. The choice had been made. Make the call, Silas, Adrian said. We couldn't go to the feds. Hargrave was the feds. We were on our own with a single, partial hard drive and a traitor. There's someone else, Adrian said, pulling out his burner phone. The state DA, Aurora Kincaid. She's ambitious, and she hates Hargrave more than she hates me. We met her an hour before dawn in a deserted, rain-slicked public square. Aurora Kincaid was tall, sharp, and had the most intelligent, tired eyes I'd ever seen. She was alone. "This is a hell of a hand you're playing. Corvino," she said, her voice dry, pulling her trench coat tight. "I'm not playing," Adrian said. "I'm offering you a gift. I'm giving you Silas Merrick, my father's consigliere. He's Moorhen. He'll testify that Director Hargrave of the FEIB is in bed with Varangian Circle, and he'll give you the codes to a vault containing what, Silas?" "Maybe 80 million, Silas whispered, "untaxed, unmarked." Kincaid's eyes widened. This was the case that would make her career. "And in exchange you walk, you get your empire back." "No," Adrian said. He put his hand on my shoulder. "In exchange, you give her full, transactional immunity. She was a victim, coerced under duress. She's your key witness, not your accessory. And you get Silas's sister into witness protection yesterday." Kincaid looked at me, then at Adrian. She saw the set of his jaw. She saw that he was sacrificing his most valuable player, his entire organization's secrets. Not for his kingdom, but for me. "Deal," she said. The next 48 hours were a blur. Silas was in a state safe house, talking. Kincaid's office was raiding the Varangian cash house, and Hargrave, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, did the only thing he could. He attacked me. I saw it on a TV in a diner. My face. A grainy picture from the Velvet Lantern's security camera. A shot of me at the gala, in my sommelier uniform. A long-lens photo of me and Adrian getting out of the Range Rover. The headline was simple. "The Mafia's wine girl, how a Corvino accomplice faked evidence to frame a federal hero." The anchor, a woman with a plastic smile, was reading the report. Sources inside the FEIB alleged that Cassia Wynne, a known associate of Adrian Corvino, was coerced into a relationship to act as a mole she's been called Corvino's pet, fabricating the ledger to protect her mafia boss lover. The coffee cup slipped from my hand. It didn't shatter. It just hit the table, the contents washing over my hands. Corvino's pet, Guy Ruucho Mafia. I stumbled out of the diner, into the rain. I couldn't breathe. This was worse than the guns. This was worse than the alley. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to erase me. They were turning my story, my choices, my terror into a joke, a sleazy, cheap headline. I made it as far as the steps of the DA's building, and I just crumpled. I sat down on the cold, wet marble, the rain plastering my hair to my face, and I couldn't move. I had survived everything, but this broke me. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes, an hour? Then a shadow fell over me. The rain stopped. I looked up. Adrian was standing over me. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't telling me it would be okay. He wasn't promising to fix it. He was just holding a large, black umbrella, shielding me from the rain and from the cameras that had started to gather across the street, like vultures. He didn't try to pull me up. He just sat down on the wet, cold step next to me. In his $1,000 suit, he sat in the rain, holding the umbrella over my head. And he just stayed, silent, a wall, a promise. We sat there all night. When the sun came up, a weak, watery gray, the vultures were still there, a dozen reporters. Adrian stood, offering me his hand. "Let's go. Kincaid has a car for us." I looked at his hand. I looked at the cameras. I looked at him. "No," I said, my voice a hoarse croak. I stood up, alone. I fixed my jacket, and I walked down the steps, straight toward the microphones. "Cassia Wynne, is it true you're Corvino's?" "My name," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "is Cassia Wynne. I am a sommelier, and I am from Ravenblock. I know what fear smells like. It smells like damp plaster and my mother's hospital bills." I looked right into the main camera. "And I know what corruption smells like. It smells like cheap, chemical ink on a fake wine label." I told him everything. The spill, the NFC tag, the Northbridge lab, the counterfeit, Hargrave, the Zinnia Trust. "I don't know what it's like to be a mafia girl," I finished, my voice ringing in the morning air. But I know what it's like to be scared, and I am done being scared. I'm choosing the smell of the truth. That afternoon, the Civic Sentinel, my bluff. My Hail Mary got an anonymous tip from Aurora Kincaid. They published the entire partial ledger, the Zinnia Trust data, the transfers to Mallory. The public narrative didn't just shift, it shattered. By nightfall, Hargrave was suspended. Mallory was being investigated. The city was in an uproar. We had won. A text came to Adrian's burner phone. It was from a new, unknown number. It wasn't a threat, it was a picture, a simple, dark photo of my mother's apartment door, followed by a simple message. Ironbridge Works, midnight. Bring the girl and the original data, or she'll be an orphan. K.D. Casimir Drozd, the head of Varangian, he had nothing left to lose. I looked at Adrian. His face was grim. He knew what this was. A final, desperate play. "You don't go," he said, his voice flat. "This is my fight. I'll handle Drozd. I'll get your mother." "My choice, Adrian," I whispered, the words of our promise echoing. "You said, my choice." He met my gaze, and he was offering me an out, a chance to run, to let him be the monster, to let him clean this up with blood. I looked at this man, who had sat with me in the rain, who had honored his promise even when it cost him his empire. I stepped forward. I fisted my hand in the front of his jacket, just as I had in the vault. I pulled him close, my eyes locked on his. "We go," I said. "We go," I had said, and with that, the world shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It turned from a paralyzing fog into a sharp, cold spike of adrenaline. The time for reacting was over. We didn't sleep. We didn't rest. The clock was ticking toward midnight. Drozd's deadline. We had hours. Our first stop was a pre-dawn meeting in the back of a blacked-out van, the engine running, the air tasting of stale coffee. Aurora Kincaid, the state DA. Looked like she hadn't slept in a week, but her eyes were electric. "This is everything," Adrian said, sliding a laptop across the table. It was connected to a secure server. Silas Merrick's full, recorded deposition, every payment, every date, every name he gave Hargrave. And he looked at me. I handed her the partial hard drive from the Northbridge raid, and this is the ledger. It links the Zinnia Trust, Mallory, and the entire counterfeit operation. It's the why. Kincaid's face was grim. "It's a gift, Corvino, but it's also a problem." "What problem?" I asked. "Chain of custody," she snapped, her voice like gravel. "Hargrave is a federal director. He'll argue this drive was obtained during an unsanctioned, illegal break-in, which it was. He'll have it thrown out of court, fruit of the poisonous tree. It's useless." My heart sank. The entire case, everything we'd bled for, was inadmissible. "He's right," Adrian said, his voice flat. He looked defeated. "We have the truth, but we can't use it." I looked at him, at this man who had trusted me, who had sat with me in the rain. I thought about my promise. The truth. "Hargrave's smart," I said, my voice quiet. "He's counting on us being criminals. He's counting on you being a criminal." I reached into the pocket of my jeans, but he wasn't counting on me. I pulled out a small, almost invisible object and dropped it on the table. It glittered under the single, harsh dome light of the van. It was the micro SD card from the gala. Adrian stared at it. I thought that was on the drive. I thought you uploaded it." "I lied," I said, meeting his gaze. "A lie of omission. I told you I had the drive from Northbridge. I never mentioned this. I kept it separate. I sewed it into the cuff of my jacket from the gala. I kept it as leverage, in case you weren't the man you said you were." Kincaid leaned in, her eyes wide. Where did this come from?" "The Rookhart Glass Museum Gala," I said, my voice steady. "I extracted it from the bottle before the Northbridge raid, before any of their illegal activity. It's clean, it's admissible, and it contains the primary key to the entire Zinnia Trust ledger." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Aurora Kincaid's face. "Miss Wynne," she said, You may have just saved this city." She didn't wait. Within an hour, she had a judge out of bed, signing a warrant, not for the Northbridge warehouse, but for the Zinnia Trust, for Councilman Mallory's offices, for every shell company on that micro SD card. The legal war had begun. While Kincaid launched her assault, Adrian and I focused on our own. The second war, my mother. Rafa met us at the safe house. He was limping heavily, his thigh wrapped in a thick pressure bandage, but he was standing. He was a mountain, and it would take more than one bullet to bring him down. "Rafa," Adrian said, clapping him on the shoulder, "one last job. The most important one, get her out." "I know the protocols, boss." We drove to the hotel where my mom was staying. I told her there was a billing issue, and I needed to move her. She was confused, scared, her hands shaking. "Cassia, what is going on? These men the news." I hugged her, burying my face in her familiar, worn coat. "It's almost over. Mom, I promise, I need you to be safe. I need you to go with Rafa. He's a friend. He will not let anything happen to you." "But where are you going?" she pleaded, her eyes searching my face. "I have to go to work," I whispered. "I have to finish the job." I walked her to the car, a nondescript sedan. Rafa opened the back door for her. I cried, silent. Hot tears I couldn't stop. I was sending my mother away with a MAFIA enforcer to save her from a federal agent. The world was upside down. As I closed the door, Adrian came up behind me. He didn't say a word. He just put his hands on my shoulders, turned me away from the car, and pressed a light, firm kiss to my temple. It wasn't passionate. It was a promise. "I've got her," he whispered. "She's safe. Now we finish this." Rafa would take her to a private airstrip, to a house Adrian owned 2 states away, and he would stand outside her door until he heard from us. "After she's secure," Adrian said to him, "get to Ironbridge. I need an exit, a real one, something they won't see coming." Rafa nodded. "The old rail lines, under the factory. They haven't been used since the 60s. I'll have a car waiting." He got in the driver's seat and pulled away. Taking the only family I had, I watched until the taillights disappeared. "Now the third war," I said, my voice hard. "The media." By noon, Hargrave's smear campaign was in full force. The Corvino's pet narrative was gone, replaced by something more insidious, exclusive Kincaid's office compromised by Corvino crime family. They were painting her as the corrupt one, bought and paid for by Adrian. They were poisoning the well. Our clean evidence wouldn't matter if the public believed the prosecutor was on the take. "I can't fight this," Kincaid's voice said over Adrian's burner phone. "He's wrapping me in red tape. He's filed a federal injunction, claiming my warrants are procedurally flawed. He's good. Corvino. He's stalling." "Then we stop stalling," I said, grabbing the laptop. "Cassia, what are you doing?" Adrian asked. "I'm a sommelier," I said, my fingers flying. "We just lost the public. I'm going to win them back. My way." I went to my old blog, the one I'd used for my Level 2 certification, the Ravenblock Vintner. I hit the Go Live button. I didn't wait for anyone to tune in. I just started talking, my face pale and determined in the laptop's camera. "My name is Cassia Wynn. The news is calling me a lot of things, but I'm a sommelier, and I'm going to tell you a story about wine." I shared my screen. "This is the algorithm I found. This is the spectral signature of a cheap, table-grade Montepulciano. This is what the Varangian Circle and the FEIB are using as a one-time pad to lock their 8-figure ledgers. They thought it was clever, but they weren't counting on someone who actually knows wine." I explained it all. The chemical markers, the tannin decay, the smell of the thermal paper labels. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a mafia girl. I was the expert. I was the one who had cracked their code. Within an hour, the Civic Sentinel had picked it up, then the national wine blogs, then Wine Spectator magazine. My old instructors, my classmates, the entire sommelier community, they saw the data. They saw the science. They didn't see a criminal. They saw a professional. They started sharing, vouching for my analysis. The narrative shattered. Hargrave's story of a corrupt DA was replaced by the real story, a corrupt federal agent unmasked by the very expert he'd underestimated. The first domino fell at 6 p.m. We saw it on a TV in a motel room. Councilman Rhett Mallory, his face ashen, being led in handcuffs from his office, his arms full of Kincaid's agents carrying file boxes. We had won. "It's over," I breathed, sinking onto the bed. "We got him." "No," Adrian said, his face dark as he watched the screen. "Look." The newswoman was speaking. "In a stunning development, sources say Director Sloan Hargrave has been cleared of any involvement, while Councilman Mallory will face charges. The FEIB has declared Hargrave a whistleblower who was actively investigating the Corvino-Mallory connection. He was still free. He'd cut Mallory loose. He'd sacrificed his pawn to save himself. He's still in charge," I whispered, the cold dread returning. "He's not just in charge." Adrian's burner phone rang. He looked at the screen. "He's the head. He's been the head all along." He answered, "Isolde." I couldn't hear her voice, only the low, bitter murmur. Adrian just listened, his face impassive. "I see," he said finally. "Thank you for the clarification." He hung up. "That was Isolde Crane," he said, turning to me. "Hargrave just seized all her assets. 2, he's cleaning house. She's been cut loose, just like Mallory. She confirmed it. Hargrave isn't just protecting Varangian. He's their American partner. He is Varangian's circle. On this side of the Atlantic, Drozd is just his attack dog." The text from Drozd, "Ironbridge works. Midnight, bring the girl." "He'll be there," I said. "Hargrave." "No," Adrian said. "Hargrave is too clean. He'll send Drozd to do the dirty work, to get the drive and clean up the loose ends." He meant me. "So the plan changes." I said, "We weren't just luring Drozd anymore. We had to get both of them." "How?" "Silas," I said, the plan forming, cold and sharp. "Silas is our bait. Drozd thinks he's coming for me and the data. But what he really wants, what Hargrave really wants, is the key to the Zinnia Trust wallet. The wallet Silas locked." "We tell Drozd that Kincaid is moving Silas tonight," Adrian said, picking up the thread. "We leaked that Silas is going to cooperate and unlock the Zinnia accounts at Ironbridge." "Drozd will come," I said. "He'll come to get Silas and the codes before Kincaid can. He thinks he's walking into an ambush, but we're the ones setting the trap." "And Hargrave, he won't be able to resist," I said. "He won't trust Drozd with that much money. He'll be there, in the shadows, to make sure he gets his cut." I pulled out my phone. Silas. When he was talking to Kincaid, he gave her everything, including the audio recordings of his calls, with Drozd and with Hargrave. I looked at Adrian, my eyes hard. "I'm a sommelier. I know how to set a stage. Ironbridge Works is an old factory. It still has its PA system, its old signal lights." I sent a message to Rafa, who was already at the factory. "I need you to patch the main speaker system into this audio file, and I need you to show me how those old railway signals work." The final plan was set. We weren't going there to fight. We were going there to expose. The drive to Ironbridge was silent. The snow had started again. Thick, wet flakes that died on the windshield. The factory loomed out of the fog, a skeletal beast of rust and broken glass. Its industrial sodium lights, high on the gantries, flickered in the wind like the eyes of some great dying animal. We parked a quarter-mile away and walked. In the shadows, Rafa met us. He handed me a heavy walkie-talkie. "System is live," he grunted, nodding toward the speakers. "The signals are on this panel. Red for stop, green for go. Simple." "Where is Kincaid?" Adrian asked. "She's set a 2-block perimeter," Rafa said. "She'll move on our signal. Green." It was 11:50 p.m., 10 minutes to midnight. We stood in the shadow of a massive, rusted ore hopper, the wind whistling, the snow collecting on our shoulders. This was it, the point of no return. Adrian looked at me, his face unreadable in the pulsing yellow light. "Cassia, my mother is safe. We have Kincaid. We have the data. You don't have to be here. You can walk away. Right now. No one will blame you." I looked at him. The man who had pulled a chair out for me at the Velvet Lantern. The man who had stopped, mid-kiss, to ask for consent. The man who had sat with me in the rain. I reached out and zipped up the front of his jacket, my fingers brushing his chest. "We tell each other the truth, Adrian," I said, my voice steady, my eyes locked on his. "And the truth is, I've been running my whole life. I'm done running." I turned, and I walked toward the open, gaping mouth of the Iron Bridge Works. "We go." I walked in first. The Iron Bridge Works was a cathedral of rust. The wind didn't just whistle, it reverberated. A low, metallic moan from the steel beams high above. Every drip of melting snow from the shattered roof echoed like a gunshot. The air smelled of cold iron, river water, and decades of decay. We were in the main furnace pit, a vast open space lit only by those sickly, pulsing yellow emergency lights. Rafa was a ghost somewhere above us, in the crane control booth, and Silas, our bait, was hidden in the old foreman's office, waiting. "He'll come from the North Bay," Adrian whispered, his voice disappearing in the cavernous space. He pulled me into the deep shadow of a defunct assembly line. "Stay here." "The hell I will," I whispered back, my hand clutching the walkie-talkie. My finger was on the play button for the audio file. We didn't wait long. Headlights flooded the North Bay, not patrol cars, armored SUVs. Casimir Drozd stepped out. He was a thick, imposing man in an expensive coat, flanked by at least 10 of his men, all armed, all moving with a predatory confidence. Silas Drozd's voice boomed, echoing metallically. "I know you're in here. The trade bring me the wallet keys and we'll discuss the girl." He thought he was the one setting the trap. "He's not alone," Adrian murmured, his eyes fixed on the shadows behind the SUVs. And just like that, a familiar, thin figure stepped out. Director Sloane Hargrave. He'd come after all, to personally oversee his victory. "Enough games, Drozd," Hargrave snapped, his voice thin and sharp. "We're here for the drive and the girl. Corvino," he yelled. "I know you're here. This is over. Send out Cassia Wynn. You have 5 seconds, or my men, his men, will tear this place apart, starting with your mother's apartment." The threat was empty. My mother was safe. He didn't know that. Adrian tensed, his body coiling, ready to move. I put my hand on his chest. "My choice. Adrian, my move." Before he could stop me, I stepped out. I walked into the center of the pulsing yellow light, my hands empty, held high, palms out. "You want me?" "Director Hargrave," I called out, my voice shaking but echoing. Drozd's men all raised their weapons, centering on me. Hargrave smiled, that thin, reptilian smile of his. "Miss Wynn." "How predictable. You've caused me a great deal of trouble. Give me the drive." "The drive," I said, letting the walkie-talkie hang from my fingers. "You don't want the drive. You want the Zinnia Trust. You want the 80 million that Silas locked away from you." Hargrave's smile faltered. Drozd looked at him, his eyes narrowing. "What is she talking about?" "She's lying," Hargrave spat. "Am I?" I held up the walkie-talkie, my thumb on the button. "I've been studying your vintages. Director, your secret recipes. I found another one, and this one is a recording from your right-hand man, Silas Merrick, and he was very meticulous." I pressed the play button. The PA system, designed to echo over the roar of a steel mill, blasted to life with a crackle of static. Hargrave's voice, "The Zinnia Trust is mine, Casimir. The feds provide the cover, you provide the muscle, but the money is my retirement." Drozd's voice, "You'll get your 10%, you paper-pushing rat." The audio file played on, the unedited, damning conversation, the plan to cut Drozd's men out of the final $80 million payday. The effect was instantaneous. Drozd's men stopped. They looked at Drozd. They looked at Hargrave. They had been risking their lives, fighting federal agents for 10%. "Turn it off," Hargrave shrieked. "Turn it off. She's lying. It's fake." Drozd's face was a mask of purple rage. He didn't look at me. He looked at Hargrave. You lying rat." He raised his pistol, not at me, but at his federal partner. Kill them," Hargrave screamed, desperate, pointing at me, at Adrian in the shadows. "Kill all of them." Droz didn't hesitate. He swung his pistol toward me. "You first, girl." He pulled the trigger. I didn't even have time to flinch. Adrian was there. He moved from the shadows like he was teleported, his body slamming into mine, shielding me, his broad back to the bullet. But the bullet never came. The click of the hammer on an empty chamber echoed. "Touch her," Adrian snarled, his voice a low, final promise as he stood in front of me, an immovable wall. "And today is the last day of your life." Droz snarled and threw the useless gun aside. "Now, Rafa," Adrian roared. A sound from above, like God slamming a door, a deafening groan of stressed metal. Rafa, in the control booth, had hit the electromagnet, a massive 10-ton sheet of raw steel, suspended from the crane, dropped from the ceiling. It didn't hit anyone. It hit the concrete floor right between us and them, with a boom that shook the foundations. It was a wall. It cut their team in two. "They're split," Adrian yelled. "Move, get them," Hargrave screamed. It was my turn. I grabbed the small canisters from my belt, my sommelier smoke bombs, glycerin, sulfur, and the chemical compound for sparkling wine, the one that created the CO2 cloud. I threw them over the steel plate. They hit the ground and exploded in a massive, thick, white cloud. It wasn't just smoke, it was fog. The same fog I'd used at Northbridge, but thicker, smelling of champagne and sulfur. The yellow lights barely penetrated it. We were plunged into a blinding, chaotic mist. "They can't see," I yelled. I ran to the signal panel Rafa had wired. I slammed my hand on the switch. Outside, on the railway line, the antique signal light flashed from red to green, Kincaid's signal. The sound of sirens, previously silent, now erupted. Kincaid's task force was moving in. From the foreman's office, Silas Merrick burst out, his face a mask of terror and resolve. He ran to a massive, ancient lever, the one that controlled the ore conveyor belt. He yanked it. With a scream of rusted gears, the belt started moving, dumping a ton of gravel and rusted scrap metal onto the floor, right where Droz's men were trying to regroup, burying their weapons, making them scramble. Chaos. Complete, perfect chaos. I turned, trying to find Adrian in the fog, and slammed right into a solid body. It wasn't Adrian. It was Droz. His face was contorted in rage, his eyes wild, his gun was gone, lost in the gravel. He had a knife. He lunged, the blade flashing. I didn't have time to think. I reacted like a waitress. I grabbed the nearest object, an empty, heavy glass bottle left by a worker, and I smashed it, not against his head, but against the wrist holding the knife. The glass shattered. He roared in pain, the knife clattering to the concrete. He backhanded me, the force of it sending me spinning to the ground, my ears ringing. He loomed over me, his hands now empty, reaching for my throat. "Cassia." Adrian came out of the fog like a freight train. He didn't use a weapon. He hit Droz full force, a tackle that lifted the bigger man off his feet and slammed him into a steel support pillar. Droz slumped, unconscious. The fog was clearing. The warehouse was filled with Kincaid's agents, shouting, "Police hands in the air!" I saw Hargrave. He'd shed his coat, trying to blend in, trying to slip out the eastern door. He ran right into Aurora Kincaid. "Sloane Hargrave," she said, her voice ice, her weapon steady. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and let's see a few dozen other things." His face was the look of a man who had calculated every angle and had just been checkmated by a waitress. He was cuffed. It was over. The silence that fell was louder than the battle. The snow was falling thicker now, drifting in through the broken roof, catching the blue and red flashing lights. I started to shake. The adrenaline was draining, leaving me cold and weak. My jaw throbbed where Droz had hit me. Adrian was at my side in a second. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into his chest, his hands tangled in my hair. I buried my face in his jacket, smelling the cold night air and that familiar, faint scent of amber. He held me, his chin resting on the top of my head. I could feel his heart hammering against mine. He pulled back, just enough to look at me, his thumbs brushing the tears, or maybe it was melted snow from my face. He rested his forehead against mine. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice rough. "It's over. You're safe." Kincaid walked over, her face tired but triumphant. "We got him. We got them all. The PCASI is being dissolved as we speak. Hargrave is singing, trying to save himself." She looked at Adrian, and her expression was complicated. "Now we talk about you." We stood in her office an hour later, the sun just beginning to taint the sky gray. "The deal," she said, "is unprecedented. Adrian Corvino, you will liquidate all gray assets, all of them. You will transfer 75% of your clean holdings." "To who?" Adrian asked. "To the city. Specifically, to a new fund, managed by the state. We're calling it the Glass and Grape Fund. It's designed to assist victims of economic crime and predatory business practices, like," she looked at me, "the families of people buried in medical debt." My breath hitched. "In exchange," she continued, "the Corvino organization will be granted a probationary legal status. You're a shipping magnate now. Mr. Corvino, nothing else. You step 1 inch out of line, and I will bury you. Do we have an understanding?" Adrian looked at me. He wasn't the boss. He was just the man who had sat with me in the rain. "We do," he said. We walked out into the cold morning air. I was free. My mom was safe. The bad guys were gone. But I felt empty. "So, what am I now?" I whispered, staring at the gray pavement. "The good behavior clause, the reformed MAFIA boss's girl, your trophy for going straight." He stopped. He took my hands. They were freezing. "Cassia, look at me." I did. "I've been in the other business my entire life. It's all I've ever known," he said, his voice raw. "I would trade all of it. I did trade all of it for one quiet dinner with you, where I don't have to watch the door, where you're not scared." "I'm not scared of you, Adrian." "I know," he smiled, a real tired smile. "That's why it's worth it." Months later, the snow was gone. The city was healing. Second Pour opened on a Tuesday in a small brick-lined space in the Canal District. It wasn't fancy. It was warm. The menu didn't just list wines. It told their stories, in chapters. On the wall, behind the bar, in a simple, elegant black frame, was a piece of tailored black fabric, stained with a familiar, deep red splash of Barolo. The place was packed. I was running, pouring, laughing. I was so busy, I didn't even see him come in. He was sitting at the bar, watching me, that quiet, intense look in his eyes. He wasn't in a suit. He was in a simple, dark sweater. He looked happy. He had a glass waiting for me. I finally finished the rush and walked over, wiping my hands on my apron. "You're late," he said, a smile playing on his lips. "The bus was slow," I retorted. He pushed the glass toward me. "The first glass, for the owner." I picked it up, a beautiful, simple Montepulciano. I smiled, remembering the lodge. "To the future," I said, raising the glass. "No," he said, raising his own. He looked at the framed jacket on the wall. "To the best damn slip-up of my life." I laughed, a real, bubbling laugh. I put my glass down and put my hand on top of his. He laced his fingers through mine. At the door, Rafa, now my head of security, which mostly meant he charmed the old ladies and carried the heavy boxes, was hanging a small, hand-painted sign. I heard a guest laugh and read it aloud. "Management reserves the right to refuse service. No PCA-SI, no FEIB, and definitely no Varangian, because they don't exist anymore." Adrian pulled the empty stool out from beside him. "Sit down, Cassia," he said, his voice low. And for the first time, with the music playing and the wine flowing and his hand in mine, I finally did. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.